Every Friday. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Rory Sauter in the News. I hope you all are doing very well. Big show today, a lot to address, a lot to establish, many notable names in attendance. Guys, I do want to introduce my first guest who's with us right now. He's had quite the career. We have Ben Graham with us. Ben, how are you? Welcome to Rory Sauter in the News, your first time on. First and foremost, give us a bio, a background, how it all started for you, all that fun stuff.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and great to be on here. So for me, I was born into a preacher's family. There's a joke in our family when you're born a Graham, it's congratulations, it's a preacher, and I'm a fifth generation preacher, pastor, raised around ministry. Our family has always kind of been involved politically, and so engaged in terms of knowing a lot of our political leaders and just being engaged there. But I was in ministry, a lead pastor for 23 years, and have really been doing ministry even as a teenager. My brothers and I grew up touring as a singing group and traveling. And then, I did my first movie when I was 11 and then didn't do much until about 12 years ago. I got back into the film world a little bit and started making movies. And now we've been a part of about 22 movies. Wow. As a producer, as an actor, and most recently, our most recent film came out that actually both my wife and I had lead roles in and starred in together, and it was kind of a romantic Christmas movie where we get to fall in love, and so it was really awesome to get to do that. But I've been blessed to speak in all 50 states in about 45 countries, and just been involved in a lot of different things. Served on the board for over 55 companies through the years. And just very engaged. My wife and I have 4 boys, and then we have 1 daughter-in-law, and we have our first grandchild, a granddaughter that's almost 4 months old. So God's really blessed us, and that's a little bit of my story.
I love it, man. I love it. Starting off, talking about this new movie, is this your first lead role?
No, it's not my first lead role, but it's the first one that my wife and I've got to do together. In some of our previous movies, I always joke she would, she would have a husband in the film, and it would be some young guy from Hollywood, some good-looking young guy. When I would have a wife in the film, it'd be some lady 20 years older than me, and I'm like, how am I going to get somebody closer to my age? And so I had to get my wife to play that part. But I guess that was the only way I could make it happen. But mostly we've done family, faith-based movies. And so, when I say we have husband and wives in other films, nothing too inappropriate, but it was so awesome to get to do this project together. And we had some great cast with us, a guy named Corbin Burnson, who's been in a host of films like LA Law and Psych and Major League, and then Kevin Sorbo, who is Hercules, and he's been in a lot of faith-based movies, and he always kind of jokes that he was the first cancel culture actor out of Hollywood. But so that's a little bit about it. And it was a great project, and we just absolutely had a blast.
And so making this movie, and usually when you're making movies, how long are you, on set for and in doing the whole process? Would you say 3 months, 2 to 3 months?
It depends on the movies. They can take about anywhere from 2 to 3 months. I've been on sets a little bit shorter. For this particular movie, I was also a producer. Right. And so, there was a lot of time going up into the film, working on it, and then a little bit of time after. But for her and I, we were on set. It was, especially at that time, I was still a full-time pastor. So I would get on set Sunday night late, and we would film Monday through Saturday. I would leave late Saturday night, go back and be home for our services and speak and all that, and then we would go back. And so, it was a very busy time. And so, like this next film that we're doing, we'll be on set for about 10 weeks out in Las Vegas, and it'll be a little easier because I won't have to go back to Nashville each Saturday night trying to do the services, and we're a little more flexible. But yeah, it's usually we're there anywhere from 3 weeks to 3 months, and it just kind of depends on the film itself.
Wow. So it sounds like you're getting consistent work. How many films would you say you make a year?
So this year we did three. Of course, there was a big strike in Hollywood, which
Yeah.
affected some filmmaking, obviously. But we did three,
Anybody
and
you know personally that it affected?
yeah, a lot of people,
Yeah.
quite a few people who are in that world, and especially like if you go down to Atlanta, Atlanta is really becoming huge on the film side of things, and so a lot of the film work was shut down there unless it was independent work,
Right.
and so yeah, it definitely affected people. And of course, I think the thing I'm most excited about, of course, in Nashville, most people are singer songwriters,
Going
and
back to that though, real quick, I just have a follow-up question. During that time
sure.
frame, were there people using various loopholes and ways around to still make their movie and not go through with this? I mean, were there still people in production?
Um, Yes and no. I mean, there were still people making films, but it was pretty much independent. I know one particular film. There's a set of films.
Yeah.
It's a more of an independent group, but they're tied in with Sony, and so they were going to shoot in Rock Hill, South Carolina, but they actually got held up because of it. So, they were really watching over that. And what happens is when they would try to get maybe an actor to come on, and the actor or maybe someone on the crew, they were a part of the strike thing, they would say no, and they just couldn't move forward. So there was definitely people trying to push forward, but a lot of people just weren't able to do it.
I'm shocked that it ended as soon as it did, as quickly as it did. I thought it would go a lot longer. I didn't think they would come to an agreement for a year or more. I thought this thing would be dragged out, just because SAG was, very firm on what they wanted, and the bigger studios weren't willing to budge. We saw that for a long time. Over and over, they came back with different deals, and nobody was really happy. So it didn't seem like something that was, ending in the near future.
No, I to be honest, I was told by some people I know who are very in the know that it was looking like it was going to be March of next year of 24.
Yeah.
And so when I got word that it looked like they were able to get things settled, I was a little surprised by that as well. And this particular next film that we're doing, that's what we were waiting on. It was supposed to shoot this fall, and so they had already made the decision to bump it to 24. Even though they were, maybe could have done it, but it would have been really tough with the holidays. So we'll shoot it in 24, but I'm glad they were able to get it resolved. And, the people the big A-list actors and people that have done well in Hollywood, they didn't hurt over it. It was the, people trying to get in, trying to break in. There's a lot of day players, people that are, every day staying busy. They don't make a ton of money, but, it's where sometimes you have to go to get into the film world. So they were the ones that really, I think, hurt over this financially, and it was a struggle for them. And I know a lot of people, both cast and crew, that were trying to find part-time jobs, find something to sustain themselves while they were there. And what I was going to say is what we did is I went into the writing booth because I'm in Nashville. We do a lot of songwriting, and so like for this movie, we had already shot it before the strike.
Yeah.
I decided to write some songs for it and didn't know if they would use it, but I was excited that the opening song of the movie, they play it, my song entirely, called "The Big Man's Coming to Town," and so that was a lot of fun to see that song get put into the project.
So I definitely have questions about that. Going back to the whole strike after the fact, did you see all the details? Because you're in the business. I mean, what improved, what they changed. Would you say it's significant, or would you say they didn't do much?
No, I mean, in my personal opinion, I think they make it sound significant. I don't know that it is. What a lot of these big studios have done is they found enough to be able to bring agreement with, to satisfy people. But when you really dive into it and look into it, there's still a whole lot that needs to be fixed. And, so much of this was over the AI stuff. And, there's more to it than that. But I mean, that was kind of leading the front of it. And, you find that while everybody's hooping and hollering that they got it fixed, here's my personal opinion. I think so many people were just so desperate to get back to work that's why they ended up settling. I don't know that they fully got what they wanted. And I don't think that this particular argument is over. I think it'll come back in a little bit different form, and maybe we won't have to go all the way to seeing another strike. But I do think, it's a battle. And this is something that we're going to continue to see with technology and with what's going on, especially in the AI world. I think it's something that we're going to continue to see a battle on.
And speaking of AI, are you concerned about it and, your job in the future and how it's taking over and how evolved it is, how advanced it is?
It's funny because I think most people, when they think AI, they're thinking replacing a cash register, somebody that's, checking out people, they think, replace somebody that most people would never think in the acting world, that would be a potential. And yet, we see it. And, you watch the new Indiana Jones and what they were able to do and in making Harrison Ford look like he did years ago. Of course, my joke was I had to do this pool scene at Christmas at Keystone. I'm like, if they can put me some abs on, I'm for the AI stuff. But the reality is I think there is this, ongoing concern is, are they going to continue to push this and how are we protected? How are we going to be safe from our likenesses being used? And when you find out the research, what they've done, I think most people were surprised as I was how much they've already been utilizing these tools to rip off actors and likenesses. And so it's already been happening. And, I don't know if you've ever seen it, but you can go to Facebook and watch an ad from one of your favorite celebrities promoting something so obscure. You're like,
or whatever.
Surely.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're thinking that there's no way. Like, and, I actually, I don't know if you know who Rob Schneider is.
Yes.
Rob
Bigelow. Goose Bigelow.
That's right. That's right. You can do it. He's a friend, and my oldest son who got married, his favorite all-time movie is Home Alone 2. I don't know why. He loves it.
And so, he was the bellhop in that movie. Yeah.
He's the bellhop. So I reached out to him and said, hey, we're doing a video for his wedding. Will you do something?
That movie too. Donald Trump did a cameo.
Yeah, DT is in there. He sure did. Yeah. So because he owned the Plaza Hotel, and
right.
So anyhow, but I reached out to him. I was like, hey, can you do a video? He's like, sure. We sent it to me. Well, Rob is in an apron and a hat from Raising Cane's, and I'm like, my heart sunk. I was like, I didn't know Rob was doing that bad. He's working at a fast food, and I get on his Twitter and find out he had done a new movie, and the guy that financed it owns a bunch of Raising Cane's in Arizona, and so he asked him to do this promotional stuff. I just happened to text him the day he was there, so he stepped out for a minute, shot this video, which was super kind. But that's what I was thinking. I was like, man, I didn't know this guy was, this desperate. And so, it's amazing though, like, you're seeing all these things happen. And I think there's a great concern, like are the actors, actresses, crew members, all these people, is their job security? Are they going to be having to go somewhere else? And this was the battle, and making sure that if they're using somebody's likeness, that there's proper compensation for that and proper authority, permission.
Yeah, and we saw Bruce Willis sign his rights a couple years ago over, and they can use, various technologies without him even being there. I'm sure you saw that, and other actors and actresses, I don't know who in particular, but I'm sure from what I've heard, others have signed the same deal where they get all the rights and you don't even have to be there physically. They can just do it all computer generated.
Yeah, no, you're right. And I think for some people like Bruce, who already at that time knew he was not going to be able to do much acting, I think that's why he did it. But I know of some other circumstances where they were using likenesses, but they, did not have permission. And I think this is the real battle. And obviously you read it, you heard about it too. Some of the actors and actresses who signed on to fight this thing because they were finding out that their likeness was being used without their permission.
Right. Yeah. I wonder how this is going to play out, how this will look in 5 years. With all these studios offering perhaps this large amounts of money that these actors can't pass up, that they can't turn down,
Well, I think ultimately for the studios, it ends up being a cheaper route in the long
Right.
run if they can go this way. And with everything going digital, in the music world, they've been trying to figure it out. It's same with the film world. The theatrical release numbers are not what they used to be. So more and more things are going to a streaming platform. But there's only so many subscribers out there, and the average American subscribe to, like, I think it's 4 or 5 platforms a month, and so there's only so many platforms and all that. And so there's just this real battle of trying to figure out what is the next step to really continue to, fund the movies. And then, I mean, when you're doing movies in the hundreds of millions of dollars, some of these budgets, it's insane. And so, I think that's some of the battle and why they're looking to this. And, if you can't tell that it's AI, you can't tell, for the consumer that's watching it, does it really matter? And I think that's the mindset. But I think there's too many people that still want to be physically involved. That I think, at least for the time being, it's it's going to be something they're going to have to continue to battle, because too many people want to physically be there, be involved. But you're right, it's a lot of, somebody comes and offers you a ton of money to basically sign your rights over. That's great, but I think the problem that you run into is then they can use your likeness for whatever they want. And, they may put you in a story that you don't feel comfortable with, that you would otherwise say no. And I think that's where maybe there's a little bit of and I know Hollywood and morals is probably not a word that's used much, but it puts them in a little bit of a moral dilemma.
Right. And going back to this, I wonder if enough of these actors and actresses understand going forward that their job could very well be in jeopardy, and they may, at some point, I mean, I don't know when, they may not have a choice.
Right.
Your thoughts, though?
Well, I think the only thing that's helping this is the independent market is getting larger and larger.
Right.
You may have heard, like, Mark Wahlberg moved out of Hollywood to Vegas. So many people are moving out, trying to do their own thing. And I think you have two sides, really. You have those that's going to stick with, kind of the big studio direction, and it's probably going to be continuing to push this, more of this world. And then you have all the people that's moving outside of there, and it's actually pretty large numbers that's moving outside of there and going, I want an alternative. And people are trying to get creative on how they do that. And before, 30 years ago, you released a film, there was really only a couple ways you could do that. Now there's so many avenues that you can release a project, that it really still comes down to, if you can be smart in your marketing, you can get your film to a wide enough audience to make the money you need to pay for the project.
Yeah, and movie theaters, I mean, they're struggling tremendously at the moment. I mean, we know that.
Mm-hmm.
But they were really failing before Top Gun 2 came out. And
Right.
even Steven Spielberg, I mean, everybody in Hollywood gives credit to Tom Cruise for saving the movie theater business, because we saw it made over $1 billion with a B, and it got everybody back to the theater. It wasn't one of those movies that was available for streaming, at least not right away. It wasn't. They made people wait a few months, but there needs to be more big movies like that I feel, to keep these movie theaters in business. Is that fair to say? I mean, this streaming scenario is taking over.
No, absolutely. And I think the thing about, like, with that movie, it wasn't politically charged. There was no agenda other than it was just a really great, fun movie. And I think Hollywood and some of these big studios would do well to learn from that. I think people are, we're so bombarded in every direction with so much of this stuff that a lot of times people go to the theater, they just want to go and be able to get away and enjoy a movie. And I was very impressed. I thought Top Gun was really good. And I think it's given us extended the time that we can do something through the theatrical release. I mean, because I was saying before that, there's no reason to put something in the theater. It's just going to tank. And then, they did that project, it did well. And now you're like, well, maybe there's still a shot again. And, people are filling that out and looking at that. And we were in conversation just 2 weeks ago with a project that we have that's done, and about the right time to release it and all that. It's going to be a theatrical release, pretty good sized budget film. And And I think that's being talked about because of that particular project, and it bringing that back a little bit. I think too, obviously during COVID, we're shut down. Everybody kind of had to go to, everything, Zoom, digital. We're watching stuff from home. I think there also was a sense of people were ready to be able to go back. And for those that didn't know if they were ready, so much hype was made about Top Gun that so many people went and then got reminded why going to a theater is still a lot of fun.
I will say though, when the movie theaters do close one day, it'll be very sad. We all remember how tragic and devastating it was when Blockbuster closed. I mean, as convenient as things are right now, the nostalgia is definitely there when you see all these old Blockbuster videos, and you go on TikTok and old commercials pop up for Blockbuster. Those were great times, man. You go on the weekends, pick out your favorite movie, go to your favorite pizza place or fast food restaurant, and oh man, just so much more simple. I mean, now everything is so complex, and I feel like everybody is just not the same. I mean, yes, we have technology that's a little more convenient, but I think our universe as a whole is more complex just because there's so many other distractions now. Back then there wasn't. Just things were more simple. I'm sure you know what I mean. Ben, you still with us? I don't know what happened. Ben, you there? Ben. Oh, we lost Ben. Hold on a second. Close out with Ben. 1 second. Come right back. Ben, I don't know what happened.
It just said signal lost all of a sudden. I don't know.
Weird. But yeah, man, I was just saying, when the movie theaters close, it's going to be a sad day, just like when Blockbuster closed.
No, I was going to say, I remember with Blockbuster too. I mean, it was so much fun, and you probably know this, but the founder of Netflix actually went to to Blockbuster, to the owners. Yeah. And this was back when you did the mail-in. I had a friend that did this. I thought it was the stupidest thing. Why would I get a DVD in the mail? And it didn't make sense to me. It was a club. My buddy did it. He thought it was great. Well, the founder of Netflix went to him and asked for $50 million, and they said, "You're insane," and didn't do that. And of course, at that time, Netflix was not making money at all. And now you look at what is happening to Netflix and Blockbuster the other way. And I miss going in there. I mean, there's so many stores that I grew up going to are closing, and I don't know, there's something about it. I like going in, physically looking at something, and Blockbuster, it was so much fun to go in there, and of course the anticipation, did they have that movie in? Was it going to be in stock? And if it was a really good movie, they might have 10 of them,
Right.
And pizza. You always had to have pizza in a movie.
Absolutely. And speaking of movies, and you were talking about budgets earlier, what's usually your average budget on each film?
I think we fall in that category between 750 to 2 million. That's probably the average, somewhere in there. A lot of those projects are more made for TV, or they go straight to streaming. Anything over 2.5 million has to go some kind of theatrical release, because you just can't. You're not going to make your money back if you don't. I mean, I say you have to, but I mean that's usually the rule. We have a film that's coming out this fall that was about $11 million budget. It's a little bit bigger film. It's a true story, a sports film. And so, it's wide there. We've got one right now we're working on. It's about a $30 million budget, and we're trying to get stronger, better. And that, is in some ways a little scary, because that's a lot of money. And yet, some of these movies that are getting pumped out now, they're spending 100, 80, 100, recently $250 million. And you're just thinking, And then when those don't do well, that kind of reminds you maybe we don't need to spend that kind of money. But we want to make sure our quality is getting better and stronger. I mean, that's so important, but you want it to be manageable as well. And so, look, I've been on a film project that had great success that only cost $225,000 to spend. Now they had a lot of bonus things that were given to them that didn't cost them money. They had a full police department that said you can use our cars, our uniforms. They brought in SWAT helicopters and all that, and probably gave them an extra $300,000 of free stuff in their budget. Sometimes when they're able to do that, you can help see the quality get better. But it's a different day and time. Just like as I keep going back to with people in the music world, they're trying to figure out how to make success through streaming, and I think that's what we're trying to do in the film world is find how can we make the quality really good, but not spend as much money as we used to.
And how long does it take to get these investors, and how many investors usually for each film?
Sometimes we can get, sometimes it's one, sometimes it's two or three. Like one of the things we're doing right now is we have an investment fund with about 12 projects. Wow. And it's a much larger deal, but there's less risk because now your money isn't tied up into 12 different projects, not just one. But sometimes a film might take us 2 or 3 years to get funded. And sometimes there's been a couple of them that we did where I agreed and, we said, let's get it done and let's go find the money. And within 2 weeks we had the money. And so it just kind of depends on the project, and finding people who have a passion about that particular project can make a big difference. And like with the most recent, this Christmas movie, the beautiful thing about it is these Christmas movies, every year we can sell them to the networks, and they'll be playing, this movie for quite a while because, there's always markets looking for, especially these Christmas projects. And so, those are kind of, this is why Hallmark is cheesy and we make fun of it because it's the same story, same scenario, but they keep making money, they keep working. And so that's why they keep making them because, it fits their platform. And so if you can find something that works, I think that's when it's really good to stick with it and ride that train until you can't anymore.
What's the ROI usually for investors?
Like over it depends on it. Yeah. I say if they stay in it for the whole time, sometimes investors want to be in for like a year or two. So they're going to be at maybe like 12, 14%. But if they stay in it long term, I've seen it go as high as, 35, 40% of what they did, and it can generate some money for a while. I always say if you get into these made for TV ones, it can almost be like it can just be like a residual income for a while because usually within a year or two you've made your money back, and then everything after that is just kind of bonus.
Wow. And so, and I know I got to let you go here in a couple of minutes, but I want to ask you a few more questions. I find your life fascinating, your story. So you're a singer as well. So you make a lot of the music for your films, it sounds like.
Yeah, I grew up touring and singing with my brothers, and so I love the music side of things as well. And we just 2 weeks ago filmed a new soundtrack for a movie that we have coming out that we're actually producing next year. But we've already done the soundtrack for it with the Italian orchestra, and that just got wrapped up last week. And so it's something that I'm passionate about, not only just making the movies, but one of the things that I think is my favorite movies, one of my favorite things is the music in those movies. Yes. And so that's where I have a passion to really create really fun music with that. And like in this Christmas movie, The Big Man's Coming to Town, it's such a catchy song. And I never forget the editor, we were talking, he said, my wife and I have heard that song a million times, he said, because she'd come to the office and it'd be playing over and over again. And he goes, but we haven't got tired of it yet. And I was like, that's what I want to hear. If we can make good music that's catchy that people love. So it just adds so much to I think the film itself when the music is good.
Yeah. And what do you find harder to break into and, stay on a consistent path and just getting work regularly, the music business or the acting business?
For me, I've been very blessed, and people have, sometimes people joke and say a movie star, and I said, no, I'm a movie miracle. It's a miracle I've gotten into a movie, much less getting to do a lot of movies, and I've been very blessed in that regards. I think I'm signed to be a lead in like 6 movies and 2 series coming up, and so I've been blessed in that department. The music aspect is newer for me, and so I would say it's probably been a little tougher because that's not necessarily what I would call my lane, and yet it's becoming one that I'm very passionate about, and I've got the bug, so to speak. It's bit me a little bit, and I'm like, I got to do more of that, and so that's what we're continuing to do, and trying to do a little bit of both. But I find a lot of actors end up becoming directors, or they become producers or whatever. I've directed one project. I've definitely produced quite a few, but I'm finding outside the acting part, the music side is really becoming my passion.
Very nice. And I know both industries obviously have their challenges. Would you say the music business or the movie business pays more and is more financially rewarding?
Well, I think that's a tough question. I think both of them have suffered quite a bit. I think the movie business you can make more money
Yeah.
than the music side right now. Because of streaming, music has went way down as far as paying, especially for writers. But there's always those exceptions to the rule that they just hit a star level where they can get unbelievable amount of money. But for the average person trying to break into those, I would say it's probably a 50-50, and you go with what you're most passionate about, because that's what you're going to enjoy, because there's going to be times of frustration. There's going to be times of it feeling slow, and you're in those desert seasons. And but if you keep plugging along and keep working at it, you'll finally get to that place where you get to that stream that starts flowing and gets momentum, and next thing you know, things are taking off. And so just stick with it and keep working hard, because the breakthrough's coming.
Amen. Amen. Well said. And you're in Nashville, huh?
That's correct. Good old Nashville, Tennessee.
It ain't so little anymore.
It is growing. It's booming. I know. It's been amazing. We're so centrally located to so much of the country. We're operating in the black as a state, which is rare. I mean, we I think finished out with a $2 billion surplus last year, and they've done well. And for whatever reason, it's a great state. It's a beautiful state, but it's just been one that a lot of people are flocking to.
Now, a lot of Nashville locals I talk to that have been there for a while say Nashville is no longer the same place. It's gotten more commercial. A lot of California people have moved there. I mean, I'm a conservative. I live in California. I'm in a more conservative, area, but I don't want to talk down about all of California. But we have a lot of f ups in this country. A lot of clowns. I mean, in this state. But yeah, your thoughts on that.
Well, I mean, look, especially being a pastor, we have multiple families that moved there from California. One particular guy, actually the director of the movie Christmas at Keystone that we were in, moved there. And a lot of people are moving, going there. I don't know that that's all the reason that Nashville's changed. It's changed just because it's gotten bigger. But, up until more recently, and I think it's still happening, a lot of celebrities that live there, well-known celebrities, music, even film. We have some well-known people in the film world. I mean, you mentioned Tom Cruise earlier. He was at a 4th of July event a couple of years ago because his kids live there because of Nicole Kidman. Her and her husband have a house there. So he was there. And for the most part, most people just leave you alone.
Yeah.
If they're a tourist and they see somebody, they would get excited. But the residents in Nashville, they let you be if you're a celebrity, and they leave you alone. And I think that's the other reason why a lot of people like being there is, people are very friendly, but it's kind of a cool town that you can live in and not be bothered. But it's changing. I mean, it's becoming very large, and it's changing. It is getting more commercialized, and that's a little sad, but it's just part of, it's the part of the way sometimes things go.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Before I do got to let you go, man. I could talk to you all day, though. It says here, though, you're a radio host as well. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I have a show called Real Talk, and it airs every week, and it just, we interview people from from Hollywood to political to ministry to business. We a little bit of everybody, and just try to have real conversations. I think so many people today are just looking for stuff that's genuine and real, and whatever they're trying to break into. And so we try to have those kind of conversations, and we have a great time with it, and it's been great. And there's so many aspects that we could talk about in this world that, and as an actor, fake and phony, people just want genuine. And so that's what we're trying to bring on the show.
Yeah. And it says here you're on several boards, including the SWAT board and the LTI board. And you've worked with various organizations on combating the opioid and addiction crisis. Yeah. It's a big problem in our country.
Yeah, absolutely. So SWAT is Sports World Against Trafficking. And it's mostly former pro athletes that are on our board and fighting human trafficking. And so we do that. LTI is one of the larger, Let's Talk Interactive, one of the larger teleplatforms, and especially dealing with behavioral health. And we, have done a lot with, especially the former administration really had an initiative on combating opioids and some of the issues there. And so something we've been involved in and served in several organizations trying to combat some of the addiction problems that we have in our country.
I hear you. And it says you were involved with President Trump's initiative for the White House Faith and Opportunity Team. Wow. So you got to hang out with Trump.
I did. Yeah. So I still get to see him from time to time. His son, Eric, and I'm probably closer to him than any of them, but we every department had a faith director that worked directly with the secretary of the department. And they had initially asked me about serving that capacity, but you work for the government. I didn't feel led to do that, but kind of got to be a liaison and just get involved. And there was a lot of faith leaders involved. We were involved in trying to help with some of those initiatives. And really, it was, as much as it was, people would like to say it was helping the Trump initiative, it was really more helping the religious organizations and just, strengthening them and feeling like they had a partner. And, I'll give you an example. When the when the fires were happening in California, they had a faith director, Mark Smith, who worked for FEMA. And he said, any churches that need help, because they couldn't get a hold of churches. They wanted to help. So I called a couple pastors who pastor large churches in California, said, y'all know anybody? They said, yeah, we know all kinds of churches that are housing people. We got them in touch and they were able to help. And so it's just things like that, being able to get them in touch with the right people so they could find the help they needed.
And what are the Trumps like?
You know what? I could do a phone call with President Trump every day. He is so much fun to be on the phone with. He's a very funny guy. And I think, the media has done him a disservice. And look, I don't mind. I'll tell you, one day we were in the White House and he had signed an executive order, gave me the pen he signed with. And I said, my dad's a pastor, right? And he said, yeah. And I said, he wanted me to tell you he loves some of the initiatives you're doing, but he doesn't always like the language you use. And he kind of gave me this look like, punk, what you about to say? I said, but my dad wanted me to tell you, if he had to deal with some of the people like you did, he'd probably swear too. And of course, he just loved that, but yeah, he sometimes comes across as a, New Yorker and, people don't like that. But in terms of, if you get to know him, he's a very genuinely nice guy. And I've watched him care for people, behind the scenes. He's not trying to do it to be seen. He really cares for people. And that's what I appreciate about him. And, Governor Huckabee, who's a friend of mine, in the 2016 debate, kind of threw himself under the bus when people were really giving Trump a hard time. And he just said these words. He said, anybody that has raised children to turn out like Trump has must not be all that bad. And I would agree with that. His children are pretty upstanding, people. And whether people like him or not politically on the which side they stand on, they seem to be, people of integrity and character. And so I appreciate that about them. They're hard workers. And I've enjoyed, my time that I've got to spend with them.
I love it. That's awesome. And before you go, tell everybody where they can find your books. I see you've written several books, a lot of books, man. Wow,
yeah, you can. Wow. You can go to pastorbengraham.com, pastorbengraham.com, and you can find all of our information. Love for y'all to sign up and check out our newsletter that we send out. And you can find out information about our films and our social media, all that stuff, the books. It's all on that website.
And to conclude, you said you've spoken in how many countries?
About 45.
Holy moly. And you've spoken in every state, you said, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Wow, man. And you've been speaking for, I assume, 20 or more years, right?
I've been speaking since I was 14.
Wow.
So yeah, so I've been
Man.
speaking for a little over 30 years that I've gotten to travel and speak. And matter of fact, in the last 2 weeks, I've been in like 12 states. It's been a crazy time. I'm actually in a Airbnb in the middle of a downtown in a loft type building, and so that's where I'm at today, and not far from Charlotte, North Carolina. And it's been great. We love it. My wife and our two younger boys are still living at home. Get to travel with us a good bit of the time, and we're very blessed to get to do a lot together. And that's why even this movie was so much fun, getting to do that together.
Amen. Amen. Well, Pastor, I'm rooting for you. I'm praying for you. Keep up the fantastic work. You've been a fantastic guest. I love talking to you. I definitely want to get you back soon.
Well, I'd love to. And Rory, thanks for what you're doing, man. Appreciate you having me on, and keep up the good work. And hope you guys have a great Christmas. God bless you.
Merry Christmas, sir. God bless you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Everybody, we'll be right back with Jason Nelson. Give us about a minute or two. We'll be right back. And we are back. Rory Sauter in the news, coming to you live from Palm Springs, California. I do want to introduce, we have with us now Jason Nelson, first time on the show. It is an honor to have you here, sir. Thank you for joining us. First and foremost, give us a bio, a background. Tell us about yourself, how it all started, all that fun stuff. Oh, no sound.
No sound. There we go. Sorry about that. Yeah, I was muted for your last guest. It was a very interesting guest you had. So, yeah, I was glad to listen in.
Thank you. I'm sorry for the delay. Sorry for
Oh,
the delay.
no.
We're running a little late. Sometimes I get sidetracked and I get very invested in a conversation, and I don't mean to ignore or, lose track of time. I just sometimes do. It just happens. I'm sorry.
No, you know what they say about live TV? You go with what's working. So
Right.
you're doing the right thing. So, yeah, background on me. I there's not a whole lot to tell, I guess. But then again, that's what somebody probably thinks about themselves. But I'm an 8-year Marine Corps veteran and a 12-year veteran of. No, it's an honor to serve. I appreciate that. And a 12-year veteran of Army Special Operations. I retired 2 years ago, ran for Congress here in Congressional District 17, founded a freeze-dried beef company here in Waco, Texas, and that's going wonderful. It's wholecows.com. It's Prep All Naturals, and we've just been everything's been going swimmingly. We love Waco. We love being here. We love the people, and it's been great in retirement. Even though I retired due to the vaccine, I'm happy that this is a good time in our life to do what we needed to do and raise our family and our 4 little children. And let's just say I was hoping for not necessarily a quiet life. I want to be productive and change the world, but at the same time, I was hoping for a life where there was a lot less violence, and
Right.
that changed recently. So yeah,
It's a crazy world, Jason. It is it's a crazy time, unrecognizable times. I don't think we've ever been this divided, this crazy, this out of control, this unstable. I could go on and on with words.
I had a person tell me, they said it almost feels like evil has been let loose upon the
Yes.
world.
Yeah.
And the answer I always say is the more people that turn away from the light, the greater the darkness will seem. But the great news is there only has to be one candle that burns bright in order for people to know where they can move towards the light. So there's still an opportunity, I think, in a world that is this dark, where you can still have this opportunity to be a bright candle, somebody that people can gravitate towards and know the difference between right and wrong, just and unjust. And I thank God that I've had that opportunity throughout my life to be put in positions where I've had the opportunity to help people on a regular basis, and have people be able to see a different side of whether it be the U.S. military, whether it be just anything, any opportunity you have a chance to break the shackles that people have put themselves in their own mind, then and allow them to see the light that is out there in the world, I think is a positive thing.
Amen. Amen. And going back to, I want to ask you a lot of questions in regards to
Yeah.
Waco. Is the name David Koresh still alive and well over there? I mean, do people still talk about him quite a bit?
My wife and I, so I was born in Texas, and my wife and I, due to the fact that I was in a military family, and of course I was deployed everywhere, we knew we were moving to Texas, and we had to make a decision about where to move. And when we looked at Waco, there were a number of things that we looked at. Waco was one of three smaller cities that we were looking at moving towards. And what stood out to us was predominantly the number of people that were members of faith, period. Doesn't matter which faith they belong to. But the fact is that, 8.5 out of 10 people here go actively engage in faith here. And that was important to us. It tells us the kind of bonds that hold a community together. But we did have questions about whether or not the David Koresh, the whole Branch Davidian thing, had still some sort of hold over the local area. And, having visited before we decided to buy a home here, I can tell you it's more of a Chip and Joanna Gaines town now than it is a Branch Davidian town, if you get what I mean.
Okay, okay. And that whole story, I've watched documentaries on it. There's been movies about it, books, articles. What do you make of that? Do you think that they may have painted him in the wrong light, set him up? A lot of people say that, they made him look crazy and he wasn't really as crazy as, they portrayed him.
It's very hard because as a person who considers myself a homesteader, we try to live as much as we can off of ourselves. Obviously, my company is designed to help people be self-sustaining. We homeschool. So, there's a lot that I understand how there can be um a view that comes from those in certain authority places where they maybe their perspective is one that can be jaded. For example, we don't vaccinate our children, and predominantly since the COVID vaccine came out, because it opened our eyes. And so our youngest child we didn't give her the Hep B vaccine when she was born, and the hospital tried to take her from us. And I think that, and having fought through that and won, because I don't lose, is that we realized that there are a lot of people that look at the choices that we've made in our lives and they paint us with a broad brush. And they say things like, Jason, you were at January 6th. And I said, yes, I went there to support the president and then to video record what was going on. Obviously was not a part of those that entered the camp. Said just the mention of being there, people automatically say, well, you're a fill in the blank slur, right? And there's just when I ran for Congress, just numerous things that people would sit here and say, well, because of this, you are this. And I try to avoid that, but I think the government has this thing out for people who want to live independently. Now, all of that said, having looked at the evidence, I think there was a lot about David Koresh. I think that one of the main things was the failure of law enforcement to get him when they had the opportunity to get him in a nonviolent way that didn't put women and children in view. But, tactical decisions are often made at certain levels that may not reflect the larger view of common sense, if you will. And I think that, but once agents make a play, I know that people in higher up positions are required to stand behind their agents. So I think there was just some bad decisions made in his arrest. And I think that the crimes he was accused of, he should have been allowed to stand trial just as any American would.
Yeah, and it really shines light on the FBI in various ways. I see how corrupt the FBI is today, and that's one of the main reasons I question, that situation and others that the FBI has been involved with.
When you talk about the FBI, or if you want to say the larger Department of Justice,
Right.
I would say, so when I was in the Marine Corps prior to my deployment to Okinawa and then subsequent deployment on the 31st MEU, right before we got there, there was a young girl who was raped by a Marine, and it was an awful situation.
Jesus. And was it an illegal? Wait, where was this again?
This is in Okinawa, Japan. So a U.S. service member had gone out and committed this horrendous crime. Okay. And what it did was it created a lot of ill will towards the Marines on the base, on all the bases there. And I think that there was this initial perception amongst us that, hey, why are we being forced to take the punishment for somebody who did something? We weren't allowed off post. There were so many restrictions put in place. But at the same time, I think that we all recognized that we had a responsibility to regain and restore our own virtue, if you will, and that we were responsible for the actions of that person, whether we did it or not. We had to acknowledge the heinousness of that person. What I'm seeing a problem right now in the DOJ is that we are seeing whistleblowers who come out, correct, that say, hey, there's been all sorts of issues that where they've been politicized, where people weren't gone after, so forth and so on. We're talking about the Hunter Biden laptop, or whether going all of the bogus charges against Donald Trump, or how they handled the different files with Biden. I mean, there's a million ways you could look at it, right? The sweetheart deals they want for Hunter Biden. I think that we can sit here and say that there's bad eggs within the FBI and the DOJ. And I think that I wish that so many other members of the Department of Justice would step forward and call them out and say, this is politicized. I mean, I wasn't afraid. I was still active duty when I found out that General Milley had gone behind Trump's back and talked to China. And I was not afraid to speak out and say immediately, that's treason. What is going on here?
And I feel like in that department, if they want to move up in the rankings, if they want to be on the highest level, they have to break the rules. They have to sell their soul. They have to be compromised. I don't think you can get to that level walking the straight and narrow.
I was once told that you'll never make a certain rank within the military if you're not if you don't get at a certain level of trouble at a young rank. Right. I think it's actually somewhat true, but at the same time, I would argue that just because there seems to be so many people who've been successful in selling their souls doesn't mean that mine is for sale. And if that means that I fail, I fail. And at the same time, it grants me the opportunity to still be able to cast stones and call out those who have failed to hold forth in their virtue.
Was it hard for you to serve under an amateur jerk-off like Milley? I mean, I would be nervous. I would find the whole situation dangerous. I mean, serving in the military, the leadership overseeing it is a big thing. It's like the main thing, I feel like, because if they're not doing their job properly, your life is at risk.
I had the opportunity to serve under, let's see. So I served under Clinton. I served under Bush, junior, excuse me. I'm way too young for senior. Bush Jr., Obama, Trump, and Biden. So I had the opportunity to see the sort of back and forth whiplash that took place within there. Is it difficult doing that? Yes, I can remember prepping for transgender training before Trump came in and said, no, we're not going to do that. And then all of a sudden, I know that it's back in effect right now. As a matter of fact, it's insanely accepted now. But
Real quick.
Yeah.
What does that curriculum entail? Can you give us like the handbook blueprint?
The funny part is that uh, training like this trickles down, and I happened to be in a position at the time where someone had to rewrite the manual for USASOC, and I said that I would do it because I knew it was an impossible task, and so I actually read the full all the guidance that came out in creating it, and I have to tell you, at the time, the guidance was insane. It was insane. I mean, you have to realize you can't deploy if you're on a medication that is required. Like you have to be able to take your medication with you, right? So you're non-deployable if you are on. I can't even think of a medication you would take, but let's just say blood thinners, right? You're on blood thinners because something happened. They'll make you non-deployable until they say certain types of blood thinners you can't have them downrange. Okay, so when someone's non-deployable, you only have a certain amount of time that you're allowed to be non-deployable or deployable in a limited status before you're removed from the military. You're medically discharged. It's considered a medical condition. Now the question is whether the military caused the condition or whether the condition was yours. Correct? Well, here's the thing: when someone goes through a trans operation in the military, they're non-deployable for so long that I mean, just the length of time that you go prior to and post operation. I'm assuming they're getting the operations. The insanity of that is just like any other soldier with another condition, you wouldn't accept that. So why would you accept that for this reason? And that we're making such special dispensation for a mental illness is just insane to me.
Yeah, it seems like it's a liability more than anything. I mean, and we're making exceptions for these type of situations. It's not good.
The military I was raised in is that you are not an individual, and that's part of what makes you so powerful. Is that you're not an individual; you're a member of a team. Now it seems the individuality of this generation is more important to them. They want to be special,
Mhm.
and therefore they'll do whatever it takes to be labeled special. And most people can't accept the fact that they're just not special.
And don't you think them repealing and getting rid of "Don't Ask, Don't Tell" was a big mistake?
That's a hard one. So, as a Christian, I feel, every sin is equal, period, unless it's harming children or women, but you get
Right.
my point, right? So
Yeah,
so
I get it.
sins are equal. So for me
Yeah,
to sit here
agreed.
and cast stones and say that
Right.
someone who's chosen to be gay, I've known gay people, I
Right.
have gay friends,
Yeah,
well,
me too.
I don't have a lot of gay friends right now, but I
Yeah,
mean,
I have gay friends, gay family members.
right.
Yeah.
But I see your larger point. So the larger point,
I feel
and
like it's
I'll
getting political though when people talk about it. When people
Right. So let's frame it. Let's frame it and take it out of people's mouths before they can rephrase it for us. Uh, what you're really asking is, was there a point in which we started to move towards celebrating this certain individual traits, and that the impetus? Was the "don't ask, don't tell" went from "don't ask, don't tell" to "wear it on my sleeve," which then all of a sudden pushed forward the rest of this social. I think that there's a possibility that could be said, but I think that it's probably it was a knee jerk reaction to that muddy middle ground that Bill Clinton put everyone in. It should have gone from you can't serve if you're gay to we don't care. Like that should have been it. That middle ground created almost like a tea kettle effect, with that steam buildup. And then all of a sudden at the end, it was this explosion of now we're all going to vocally go get married and do all. Everyone before that, I remember having gay friends in the early 2000s, late 90s who called us breeders. They made fun of us, the idea of getting married and settling down. And that was contrary to the whole gay lifestyle. And now it seems to be, where can we infringe upon the family structures, the traditional structures that exist in the United States? How can we in some way take them over, re-own them, and make them ours? And they're down to Pride Christmas now. Where how much further down can you go?
and you just mentioned the radical shift in terms of the mindset, and how things have just drastically changed. What do you think is the main factor, the main thing to blame? I mean, there's obviously a wide variety of variables. Would you say it's politicians? Would you say it's the propaganda from movies? Would you say it's video games? I mean,
Well, I think the cultural shift is probably a it's a menagerie of cause and effect, and you could look at it and say anything that I still point to Columbine and say that was caused by video games. Absolutely, the desensitization. I mean, why? Because we had rifles in our cars in school. When I was in school, and that was around the same time it was normal to have a hunting rifle in the back of your truck. So I think as you look at larger social changes, when you look at this particular issue, I think that there's a this is a long answer, but I'm going to make this as short as possible. Yeah, look at the children of the baby of the greatest generation, right?
yeah,
They were the ones who turned around and created the late 60s and all of the 70s. What was different about that time frame than any other time? Well, we had a war that everybody signed up to fight that went on to have no point. And it stretched past the length of time in which people had fought World War II. So you had the children of the greatest generation doing what they thought was their mission with no clear goals. Then you have the loss of innocence of Kennedy, but then the culmination of landing on the moon, which we would think would be the catalyst for the jumping point for society to continue to evolve. But instead, what I think it was the last great mission that was set forth. So what was left was this group of people who had no mission, no guidance, and they became consumers and they raised children who were consumers, right? And so pop culture became sort of their inflection point where they began to make their impression in the world because they had nowhere else to make it. And this is aside from obviously the tech boom and things. But when you think about how small of a segment of society is involved in the tech boom and things like that, pop culture is the larger guiding principle and has been since the late 60s and forward. So what happened around the year 2000 is that you had a swing because of 9/11. You needed to put a lot of men into the military to go fight the war on terror, and the movies reflected it. You saw the back to the almost the 1980s Porkies, the hypersexualization of women, magazines that were nearly nude but somewhat accepted by society. And I think that permeated very quickly into the culture and created this bro culture that existed, the entourage type bro culture. Those that didn't go and serve, but, still and it guides into the hyper masculinity, which isn't a bad thing. But in general, the pendulum swung back. And that's my theory is that roughly around the end of the 2000s, you saw the pendulum swing back. At first, you saw it with social things, the hey, you can't say that. And then it moved forward into other things, including the change of our entire. Well, if you guys are going to be hypersexualized, then we're going to be hypersexualized. And that includes all of what we do, and we're going to shove it in your face. So that was a long answer, but I've been thinking about that a lot, actually.
No, I think it's a great answer. And going back to the early days, you mentioned you could take rifles to school, and I've seen a lot of older videos and read various reports that what you just mentioned, back in the day, there used to be, gun classes. Everything was like really safe. There weren't all these shootings. But talk about that. What was it like living through that?
You're making me feel old. I'm not that old. I'm only 44. It was different because, we talk about our children. So when I was 8, I remember being allowed to roam all over my parents' property. And at the time we were stationed somewhere where we had some property. And I was allowed to go to my friend's house, bicycle down to his house at the age of 9. I remember being 10 years old and it was normal to be home alone. Normal. Like you come home from school and you go in and you make yourself a snack and then you do your chores and then you do your homework because you want to not get yelled at, but you watch DuckTales or whatever. These are normal things. And I think now we don't like to let our 7-year-old, 8-year-old out of our sight. And obviously that's a reflection of a lot of things that have happened in my life, and even obviously what happened recently. But it's also a reflection, I think, of our larger society. Are we inundated more with bad things that happen? Yes, we are. But at the same time, are more bad things happening because people who maybe before didn't have the means, access, the ability to read into other people's horrible ideas, maybe we're perpetuating it. And that wouldn't be an abnormal thing when you know that 1% of the population is insane. And once you know that, it's just a matter of what kind of insane.
And you brought up how, things have gotten a lot more toxic. People have gotten a lot more poison. A lot of this degenerate behavior is being enabled. It's being rewarded. Um, in regards to that, do you think there's ever any coming back from this? I feel like we're at a point right now where all the values that the founding fathers and Western civilization stands for have been thrown out the window. And like I said, do you think the damage is too deep? Do you think there's too much shit, or do you think we can actually revamp this? And your thoughts?
Oh, I wouldn't, and again, I'm not plugging my company, but I wouldn't have created my company if I didn't say that I thought we needed to prepare for the worst. But
Right.
at the same time, I wouldn't be raising my children if I thought that the worst was all there was, because I would be one of those weird people that are teaching my children only, survival skills and that's it. I think that there is a chance to turn it around. But what I think about, and you touched on when we talk about don't ask, don't tell. It's the larger things. Why do we have third rail issues, and why do we let the hysterical people drive these conversations?
Yes.
Why can't we openly talk about it? If we openly talked about it, then I truly believe, look, not everyone's going to be happy with the answer, and sometimes it's going to end up drawing a line and compromise that we're going to have to acquiesce to. But largely, I think that we would find that most of our arguments would win on merit. And so
Right.
because of that, I think that this, and you'll note it's mostly from the left. If you try to bring up a heavy issue, an issue that's a third rail, talk about Social Security, anything, they find a soundbite, they play it over and over, and they don't allow the issue to become something that we talk about, right? So when you think about, for example, your non-discretionary spending that the United States has, our liabilities exceed our GDP at this point. So we're not our GDP, excuse me, the money that we're bringing in taxation. So why is it that we continue to sit here and not allow ourselves to talk about social programs? And it's just an example of everything. It's the microcosm of these largesse, this inability of conservatives to recontrol the conversation and refocus it and make it about facts. And you could also point to the media conglomeration, but hey, everybody wins when we're all fighting each other.
No, I agree. Now, do you think the culture issues, all this divide, is a distraction from the bigger problems going on? Because I will say, early on, I did pay a lot of attention to all these culture issues, all this divide, all this nonsense, all this propaganda. But then I learned to ignore it because I felt like it was a lot of noise and it was distracting from the bigger things going on. And this is the way the elites separate us. And as annoying and as upsetting as it can be sometimes, I try not to give it that much attention,
Well, and I can understand that, but let me ask you, Rory, do you have children?
I don't.
Okay. Your world is going to change when you have children.
Right.
And so your views even now on the cultural divide and
believe me, it bothers me.
Oh no, I'm not saying it doesn't, but I'm saying,
Right.
but you're active, like how it's going to inspire you to want to act.
Yeah.
Like this tragedy that just happened that we just dealt with. The outcome of it isn't for me to run around and scream about. There's a lot of things I could scream at this guy about, but we look at it and say, okay, it's an opportunity to talk about sex trafficking, right? And where it's an
Right.
opportunity to sit here and tell people that live in small towns that this is not a big city issue. This is an everywhere issue.
Right.
I think that anytime we have that opportunity to do that, and your perspectives are going to change. But I'm not saying you don't feel that way. I'm just saying as you become a parent, I didn't mean that as it sounds. When you are a parent and you have children, as they go through their stages, you start to see things and describe it to you. Because when people tried to tell me, I was going, yeah, I hear you. And I didn't hear them. And so I don't even try to tell people. But when you do have children and you see that, you'll start to say, oh man, I can't just stand idly by for that social issue, because I see where it's going to evolve and arc into, and it's going to impact my children's lives.
Right. And what kind of things around that area are troubling that you're fighting back against? I'm sure.
No, I mean, whether it be truth in vaccines, again, nobody wants to talk because Trump invented it and taking credit for it. So is
right,
Biden.
and that's the problem. I've called out Trump for this Operation Warp Speed nonsense. I agree with a lot of what he did. I've given him a lot of praise. I've given him a lot of credit. I've said that most of his policies were very effective and they went a long way, and they were highly rewarding. But he did make, I would say, a few mistakes. Operation Warp Speed was one of them. The printing of money, a lot of it. He raised the debt more than Obama. And he did campaign on Obama raising the debt more than all presidents in history combined. In 2016, he campaigned on that, but then he went in there and, did not handle that well, did actually worse than Obama in that department. Asking for interest rates at negative percent, not good, not a smart move. Keeping Fauci around and keeping a lot of these bureaucrats around, bad move. More hirings and firings than any administration I think I've ever seen. So at the end of the day, I understand Trump can't make all the decisions and do everything. I don't know what happened.
Hold up one second. If you can still hear me, I'll be right back with that.
Okay. You want to take a quick break?
We can do that if you'd like. I think it's just the camera. I need to switch the battery.
Okay, yeah, we'll quick break.
Okay, thank you.
And we are back.
Hey, sorry about that. Technical difficulties.
No worries, man. But yeah, I was just mentioning, he did make some mistakes, and he's not. And this is what really rubs me the wrong way and bothers me is the people that think Trump can do no wrong. We have to call balls and strikes. We have to be fair. As great as he may be, he pulled off some miraculous things. He's got flaws. He's a human being. I think a lot of people portray him as this Messiah-like figure, and that can be dangerous. I know I did once upon a time. When he first got elected, I was over the top for this guy. I looked at him like he was Superman. And then as the years went on and I saw things in different ways. I'm still a fan of his. I will vote for him, but I realized that he did certain things, some things that were not good. Were not in our best interest. And I believe that was because he had a lot of bad people around him. But at the end of the day, he's still the president. He's still responsible for who he surrounds himself with. And I don't like how he lacks accountability. Like, he'll never admit when he's wrong. He has a lot of pride. And like he's saying right now, still in interviews, he saved 100 million lives with the vaccines. That's just not true.
Well, so I don't know if you're aware of this, but my children's godfather before he passed, well, my daughter's godfather was Zev Zelenko. And
Oh,
so,
wow.
yeah,
Yeah. Wow.
so Zev's,
Wow. I had Ann Vandersteel on. She works.
and it's a good friend of mine as well. Yeah.
Yes.
So, Zev, I was with him in Dallas when he passed, and you know, he told one of his literal dying thoughts was that he was so upset that he couldn't get in to see Trump and get him to just stop it, to just stop. And the thing about Trump is not only is he not a deity, which some people tend to uplift him to that, and I recognize that a lot of that comes from wanting to be like a shield because he gets so many arrows thrown at him that you almost want to just block them all because it's not fair, right? So, hey, if I let those arrows through, even if they're like you said, calling the balls and strikes, it's like, well, yeah, but now you're not being fair. Well, I don't call fair. I call what it is. So I'm going to vote for Trump. That said, I think I'm voting for Trump for different reasons this time than I did the first time. I think that there is not a single candidate running for president that made every right decision when COVID was done, and I know because I know what the right decision should have been. And I just am shocked that again, once we talk about things you're not allowed to talk about, right? Fauci still being in there. Fauci should have been gone immediately. I still am in shock that we've not had full investigations into this. It was my primary reason for running for Congress, and if I ever decide to run again, which I'm sure I will, but that will be my number one goal is to get that man before Congress to answer questions that I don't think that people are willing to ask him. But as far as Trump's concerned, the guy is not perfect and he made a lot of mistakes, but he did a lot of great things. And I think
Right.
that on the seesaw, because it's not judgment scales, but on the seesaw, we can weigh that he did more good than bad. But on the bad side are a lot of things that we as conservatives are supposed to be against. And even if you were to say his deficit spending was more of a Reaganomics type, and we would have seen that had it not been for COVID, it doesn't matter because he's still responsible for what happened during COVID. And you can time the COVID response, right? It's right after Trump was not impeached. They then made COVID the thing, right? So anything to keep Trump from getting into office. I think they'll make another disease right now just to keep people from voting for Trump. But again, there are so many things that for people who are just lining up and thinking that Trump's going to step into office and fix all of this, he's not. And if he doesn't surround himself with the right people, I'd love to serve with the administration, and if I'm given that opportunity. But from my experience working with him and his team, I think that if you're not willing to constantly say yes, then there's a difference between I will get it done and that's a great idea. And if people aren't willing to separate those two and say, you're the president, I'll do it, but sir, this is my job is to tell you that's a bad call. Then he deserves what he gets.
Do you think he realizes how many mistakes he made? How many errors he made? Or do you think he thinks that everything's dandy?
People are only able to react to information they're given, right? So if President Trump is still being given information that shows that the vaccine saved lives, then what else would he say? Is he suddenly going to come out? So if he's not open, and if his inner circle is not open to him getting the information that says the truth about it, and we don't even have to get into let's just skip the vaccine for a second, which I don't want to ever. I'm never going to forgive anyone for that. But
Right.
let's just talk about the why prophylaxis was not given. I mean, we went against years of medical science that sat here and said, try anything and everything that you have available, and listen to your frontline doctors, and they didn't. And what we now know that this was a coordinated effort, right, by NIH. So this is an opportunity for Donald Trump to say, hey, I wasn't aware of that. And because I wasn't aware of that, I can now say that I would have done this differently. And those people were wrong. Not just, yeah, it was perfect. If they hadn't shut down the states, we would have been perfect. It's not just not true. It was a flu gone awry. We should have asked the elderly to be extra cautious and given them a prophylaxis, and then just move forward in society. And instead, we set back a generation of children in school. We set back manufacturing by a decade. We set back manufacturing growth by over a decade. We've driven food prices up. Inflation is now, I mean, year over year is insane. People are trying to say it's 3.5%. I call BS because I've been to the grocery store. So, Trump bears some responsibility for that. So I want to hear from him his plan to get us away from that, other than just people feeling better.
Some people have said, actually, I would say a significant amount of people have tried to mention and suggest that he was bullied into it. Do you buy that? Or do you think at the end of the day, like I think, that he's in charge of his administration? He calls the shots. I mean, he may have people whispering in his ear, misleading advice, but I don't think that's a valid enough excuse.
Right. So President Trump has this tendency to take things on as personal. So I
Right.
personally made every decision. I personally did this. I personally did that. It's kind of like Al Gore inventing the internet, right?
Right.
And it's he does it with a lot of the victories, but I don't see him do it with a lot of the defeats. And here's the thing about it. I don't expect the primary executive of the United States of America, to know everything about everything. That's impossible. And they are going to be required to hire lieutenants who hire experts, and they need to constantly be surrounded. And if you start to find that you are being led astray or being given, you've got to root it out and you've got to put somebody in there. And we saw some high turnover, which does tell us that one of two things: either he was asking for things that couldn't be implemented, or he was recognizing that there were people who were not in that position that should have been in that position, right? That had those faults. So either way, I don't think that he took responsibility where he needed to. And I think that he needs to take some responsibility for that, and not for the purpose of allowing media attacks, not for the purpose of weakening his own stance. If anything, just for showing us how we're going to do things differently moving forward.
Do you think his pride gets in the way of him doing that? Do you think he's got
yes.
too big of an ego to admit that he was wrong?
I was talking with some friends recently, and I said, as a surgeon friend of mine, and I said, I'm starting to realize that I think the only real humility is practiced humility. And what I mean by that is that if somebody were to tell you, hey, you're doing a great job at hosting your show, you would demur and probably say, oh, no, thanks. It's the
Right.
lighting and I
Right.
just great guests or whatever. I don't know what you would say. I'm hoping you would say something of that nature, right?
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Right.
I'm not an
But-
arrogant individual.
Right. So it's like when someone says, thank you for your service. I say, I have a pretty standard canned response, but I mean it. And it's, hey, it was an honor and a privilege to serve this great nation. It sums up everything I feel. It's humble, but at the same time, it's a practiced humility. Do I feel like I'm special for having served? No, but it's still a practiced humility. I don't think anyone can be humble, because if you were so humble that you were, I don't know, surprised by your own, someone said, just Rory, you're just kicking butt on your show. And you were just like, what? I am? No way. I mean, at that point, you would go, well, why are you doing a show? If you don't have the confidence, you would never be that good. That
Right.
you see what I'm saying? So I don't think that President Trump has a practiced humility. I don't think he knows how to do it. I don't think it's a part of his personality. And I think that he is just a person who puts mistakes in his rear view and says, a mistake was made and it was for me a learning opportunity and I'm going to move forward. And you're asking me to read his psyche. And I don't want to get too deep into that, but that's the only answer I can come up with. It's because if I don't start thinking in terms of the fact that he is that this is a personality trait by design, then I start to worry that it's reactionary by default, and that to me is a bad trait.
Do we fault him for this, or do we just accept him for the way he is? I'm just wondering, is it
I think that from the very beginning, when they started attacking him for his huge, anointing, when he first became president and sworn in and said it's the largest crowd ever, there were a number of things that happened that day that I think that just changed how the media decided they were going to cover this president. So one, they went after obviously what was hyperbole, right? And they made it an immediate fact check and a liar. And that became the focus, not the new president coming in, nothing about his agenda. It was an attack. Secondly, note that the president talking about the size of a crowd overshadowed a riot in Washington, D.C. that happened at the same exact time. I mean, that's insane, right? A riot going on in Washington, D.C. during the inauguration, and the media is focused on whether or not the president sent out a tweet and comparing photos between Obama and him. It's insane to me.
and speaking of the January 6th scenario, you were there. What do you make of that? What do you
I went to January 6th to be able to be a part of history. I've been at a lot of events in my life. I'm sort of a low rent Forrest Gump, but I also went to record and to be able to give video testimony of what was happening. I happened to be on the near the Capitol right when the police opened the gates and let everyone in. I left the Capitol right when the crowd went from jubilant to violent. Because for one, I was on the periphery. I'm disabled, and I don't want to be, hurt. But secondly, because I was aware that there were bad actors there that were pushing people. And when I say bad actors, we could say doesn't matter if they were undercover or not. Doesn't matter. Bad people who were pushing people to do bad things, and I could see and sense. I mean, part of my job for 12 years was just being able to walk into a room and understand to get a feel for things. It's called atmospherics, and I could sense the herd had shifted. So we left at that moment, but it was an insane thing to be a part of because so much of that video that you see from that day is from the right in the Capitol, right in that little pit right there, and what you don't see are the 800,000 people that are in the background across near the fountains that had stopped when they realized that, wait a minute, that doesn't look like we're supposed to go over there. Like they had come in marching in from the main group, and by then, the tear gas and stuff had started. So, but you don't see that. You don't see all of the peaceful people that were there and people who were watching that and were ashamed. They weren't hope. I mean, what is anybody? What people are going to go in and take over Congress and now we're in charge? That's not how it works. Nobody thinks this is not Russia in 1991, right? So I think that people were just saddened because they know that was not what was supposed to happen that day. We were supposed to make our voices heard through song and through patriotism, not through violence perpetuated by a very small group of people.
So you knew, you had a feeling that day that the media was going to turn this into something,
As soon as it, you mean on January 6th?
Yeah.
Oh, as soon as it happened. I mean, so I was with my security.
Did you think and have a feeling that the media was going to make it into the type of headlines that it became, how large of a story it was, how they say, it was as scary as 9/11 and the Holocaust? I mean, did you think that narrative would be in place?
I think that they tried to make that the narrative, and I think that they somewhat succeeded on their own side. And I think I got that feeling the moment heard the first tear gas canister go off. The minute I first heard, I said, "Oh, that's it." And I was already down by the front lawn by that point, over by the fountain. So when I heard that go off, I said, "Yep, that's it. They're going to turn this into." And again, I'm looking at a crowd of 750,000 people just standing there, and I know that's going to be the outcome of what happens here. And it was crazy because uh, I think they failed that pipe bomb that they put out over by the DNC. That it had that succeeded, then they would have had their 9/11, but it didn't, and because of that, they ended up with what they had.
Now, when you were there, did you notice a lot of these federal agents
Yes,
that have been said to have been in attendance?
yes, no question. I saw them when we were up by the Washington Monument. Went through the crowd. Again, I had a security team, so I was able to move about. And yes, there was no question. They're so obvious. It's insane.
And Jason, when they were throwing tear gas, when they were doing that, that was all to get them all riled up, right? That was to get them all amped up and make the narrative look like they were attacking and being aggressive, when in reality they were just reacting to getting sprayed with tear gas.
Right. So the only reaction I can have to that is from what I've seen from the videos that were released, obviously, because I wasn't standing there. But I'd moved away by then. I could sense the crowd turning long before that. Yeah, were men who were up on the tower screaming, "Let's break in and move forward." And it's just when you sense a unified battle cry from a group of people. We could see that the police had not moved. They had actually moved the riot police up. And I said, this situation's about to change entirely. And we just told my security team we weren't going to film there anymore. But, it felt very staged, if you will. It's planned. And again, this is not to, again, there were many Americans who were there who were not federal agents who committed crimes. There were. And those people are being held accountable for that. But there were also many people who were just caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. They weren't told they couldn't be there. And when they get invited into the Capitol, they went on a stroll through the Capitol and they left. And those people are somehow rotting in a jail, and their lives are ruined. And I don't understand that. I mean, again, you shouldn't have been in there. That it's just common sense tells me you shouldn't have been down in that pit in the first place. But the police opened up the gates. I have the video, and let people down there. And those people, I wonder how many were forced to violence, like you said, by tear gas, by other people. You can only get hit in the head so many times before your body's going to start lashing out, right?
Yeah. No, absolutely. And did you get a visit from the FBI? Because there's been a lot of people that have gotten visits that had nothing to do with it. I mean,
no, I mean, I think that it's very evident based on what I posted and what I shared and shared in live stream that I myself was in no way. I was not down in the pit. I was not attempting to do anything. I was there recording as a member of the media. At the time, I just had a small little thing we don't do anymore, but we had a small little news channel and we were there. If I'd had any idea that it was going to turn into what it turned into, again, I wouldn't have been anywhere near the Capitol. And it's not out of fear of the FBI or anything like that. It's because I'm ashamed that people fell for the ruse. I'm ashamed that there are Americans that went in there and said, yeah, okay, let's start, doing this. And you're going, are you like, what are you thinking? Like, there is no objective here that has a win for us. It is insane. And that's it.
interesting. Very interesting. So how many people do you think, or did you count, went into the Capitol? Because I mean, I've heard.
Oh, I didn't.
Numbers.
I wasn't there when they went into the Capitol. I only know how many people crossed the boundary fence into when they opened up the gates and let the people through. I would say probably in the hundreds through each entrance. that went through. But again,
Wow.
there were things. So I have video of it. So there was, for example, kids on scooters that were riding around, electric scooters, that were rounding people up and telling them where to go. Hey, get over here, get over here. And then when the police, when they young people went up and started shaking the gates, those were not the people that went in. They actually pulled back and went away, which was very interesting. So the police moved the gates, but at first the gates were harmed by people, poked at, and things like that. And those people walked away. The kids on the scooters mysteriously disappeared. And they kept telling me, "Are you a member of the media?" Yes. Well, and so try to point me out to people, and so it was just very weird. I don't know. It has all the hallmarks of a psyop. Let's just put it that way.
So you could feel the energy. You could feel.
Absolutely.
It felt in a way, it sounds like a Hollywood movie set.
It did, and the whole thing just felt very orchestrated. And again, that's not taking away from people that committed crimes, but
Right.
I'm just saying the whole thing felt very orchestrated. I don't know by who. Could have been anybody from BLM on down to Nancy Pelosi, right? I mean, we don't know. This is going to go up there with the JFK conspiracy. We'll never, ever, ever find out the truth behind this. I firmly believe that.
You don't think we'll ever get all the fully...
I absolutely believe they've destroyed most of the evidence that would give the full story, especially to any DOJ agents or anything of that nature.
So you don't think we'll ever see the entirety of the raw footage? What we'll see is only redacted. Don't you agree?
Right. So if you were the nefarious person who perpetrated this, and this was your intent, was to paint these, it was to take down an entire political movement and do all. So put your mindset, you're that evil person.
Right.
Do you have any loose ends?
Right. And you know what the crazy part about this entire thing is the fact that all of these politicians continue to say in our party that they're going to give us full transparency. They're going to release all the footage. We all know that's bullshit. That's a talking point. If they were going to do it, they would have already done it. There's a reason why they're releasing redacted footage. They're not allowed to give us full transparency. They're not allowed. I feel like there's many things stopping them, especially some of these elites who hold the keys.
I think that, again, so we get back down to firing arrows at the president, at President Trump, right? Everybody wants to shield them from all of them, right? So when you look at the January 6th, I think that the desire on the side of the people who might even be unwittingly helping people who helped create it, really
I believe Republicans and Democrats were in on this.
Right, but they don't want video of police beating somebody to death. Right. No. They don't want that. They don't want that out there. And had Ashley Babbitt not been shot, we would have had other deaths that would have been highlighted. Right. And instead, those have been completely just written over, all of the injuries and things like that. So I think that, and there's a natural tendency on this side, again, I don't know why organizations don't just kick out their bad apples. If you exposed them all, you would actually gain more credibility.
Right. And did you see Speaker Johnson come out and say recently that when he does release footage, he will start blurring out various faces? That seems extremely sketchy to me. That's not...
Yeah, so I don't understand in any instance how any of this at this point is protecting anyone. So so blurring out anyone at this point, right?
Seems like it would be blurring out a Fed or something, somebody that, involved.
Right. So anybody who's been dragged to the mud. So what they don't want is they don't want you being able to do a process of elimination. They don't want you being able to go through the list and say, who was it? So Ray Epps is the one that slipped through, right? But how many other Ray Epps were there that they blurred out and they're not going to let you know about? And that I have a problem with. And because whoever's going to do the masking on that side is going to do it in a skiff, and it's going to be done. And they're going to say, we're going to cover up all agents. And they're going to say, fine, we agree to that. but they're not going to be required to identify any agents that were in civilian attire and not explain who those people were. And I don't believe that the congressional committee is going to dig deep on that and follow through, because I don't think it makes enough headlines.
Did you happen to see if they were waving people in to the Capitol? Is that actually true? Because there's been numerous reports that state that.
So again, I've seen them. I have video of them being waved into the Capitol grounds, the fences being moved, and the police waving them in. What I don't have is personally, because I was not there, people being led into the Capitol, because that was obviously much later.
Right.
That said, those I've seen enough video online of them opening it in, welcoming people in, giving them fist bumps, walking them on a tour. So I don't think is of much question to anyone. Again, other people are making the arguments they were doing it to de-escalate. That doesn't make any sense to me. If you have a near riot on one side, then why would you open the doors? I mean, those doors are impenetrable. Period. I've been in there numerous times. The halls of Congress are impenetrable. Close the doors. You couldn't get through there with a tank. So as far as, and you just put riot police up on the top tier and just start dumping tear gas. But instead, they were more focused on having a BLM photographer up on the second tier.
Do you find it troubling that they're still arresting people to this day, some of whom were not even involved? I don't know to what extent a guy named Siaka, who was just arrested last week, or was it a couple days ago? And
Yeah.
Elon Musk spoke out about it. I've had him on my show about a year and a half ago. I interviewed him for over an hour. A very bright individual, very smart guy. But yeah, they just went after him and slapped him with a bunch of felonies and a bunch of different charges. And
So
this
what are
is
they
illegal.
arguing? Did he enter the Capitol?
I don't think he did. No, I know he was there, but I don't think he was one of the ones that went into the Capitol.
So I again, so so I'm not trying to walk a fine
He's
line here.
the black conservative actor in Hollywood, and
Right, I read about that. He entered he stood in the threshold of the Capitol.
oh, okay.
So so they charged him with entering the building, unlawful assembly in an area. Again, I think that painting a broad brush across each individual case is unfair. There were people that committed acts of violence, people who committed acts of vandalism. We could do whataboutism all day. We could talk about the BLM riots of 2020. We could talk about all sorts of stuff.
Right.
But in the end, again, I'm all about personal accountability. There were people that are they're having books thrown at them that shouldn't have the book thrown at them, and I believe that's due to media generated hype and political pandering. But outside of that comment, I think that, if you were a person who went to the Capitol for the Trump speech, and even if you walked onto the grass because there was no fence there, but you stopped on the outside and you took a couple photos, and then, you realized something right wasn't happening, you walked away. Yeah, I'd be shocked if those people were arrested, meaning people like me. But if people who were in the pit and had, and they can be seen grappling with the police, then eventually, do I expect that they will be? I'd be shocked if I would just go turn myself in. I mean, I'd get it over with, because they're going to find you. But is that fair? Is it, again, is all of this being done for political reasons? And there's so much more I could just kind of go on about. But yes, that's exactly true. What's happening is this is politicized. And those people who are in there are political prisoners.
Now, what do you see as the punishments going forward? What do you see, happening with proper justice? Do you think we'll ever see it? I mean, it's one thing to pretty much at this point, understand, and we can say that nobody's ever going to pay a price for orchestrating this, but will the people in jail, be freed properly? Will Trump deal with this accordingly when he gets into office, or will he just put it to the side?
I think Trump would. I think on day one, Trump's going to do it just to prove a point. He's got to appeal to his base and let them feel like they get some victories. I don't think he's going to be left with an option. I think that you'd probably see 90% of them released, and I think you'd see the other 10% have sentence reductions. Because we know who those people are, right? So, but I think you'd see the 90% would be probably released immediately. I don't know if he would do full pardons. I'm not sure how he would do it. I don't know. I'm not 100% aware of the mechanism by which the president has the right to intervene in those cases. So it's other than a full pardon. And if they aren't being um, if they haven't been tried, then they can't be pardoned. You know what I mean? So you have the people who are in waiting, so you can push through. There's a lot he could order the DOJ to do, but again, that's a question of political will. How much does he have in the beginning, and how much political capital does he want to spend? Realistically, Trump hasn't talked about those people. He does. He talks about them at his rallies. He does things like that, but you don't see him on the national platform talking about it because he himself doesn't want to remind people about January 6th. That's a political talking point they want to move away from.
Do you think he actually sincerely cares about these people, or he would just pardon them because it makes him look good?
Gosh, I got to imagine being president is really hard, right? You know,
Right.
I mean, your bandwidth can only be so much. Do I think he cares? I mean, yeah, as much as a person can care. Do I think he cares as much as he should? No. I that's my personal feeling, but that's not a black mark on him necessarily from me. I don't want to sit here and I know a lot of people, they have their own set of prerequisites for the president, right? Or for President Trump in general. I care more about the COVID response than I do this. Why? Because that impacted far more people. Is that, can I care about both? Yes. Can the president care about both? Yes. But you see what I'm saying? There's still political capital that has to be expended, and at some point, do I think he might do it neutrally? Yes. Or with a broad brush just to make a point? Yes. But I don't know. I'd rather see the America right now. I don't know. The terrorists who are in Hamas's hand, or the Americans who are in the terrorist hands in Hamas right now in Gaza, I'd rather see them come home right now and be freed from that horrible hell. And if the president's going to be spending capital or time on something, I'd like to see it spent on things like that. But maybe Trump has things in place to be able to do all of these things.
Now, with all of the damage that's already been done, with all the dirt that's on Trump's name, with everything that's been said about him and the way he's been portrayed, obviously we know damn well his mouth and some of the things he said does not help his case. And it's one of the reasons why a significant amount of voters are turned off by him. Even though he may have some good policies, we live in a time where voters, in many regards, like to vote with feelings over facts. And if you're an asshole and you're open about being an asshole, that's tough in a sensitive society. Sadly, people do better with people blowing smoke up their ass and telling them what they want to hear. Nobody really wants to hear tough talk, even though I understand Trump is over the line, way out of context quite often. At least he's authentic about who he is. A lot of these politicians are not.
So, but here's my question for you, at least initially for the election. What voters are we worried about him turning off? Because I'll give you the reason.
I just wonder if he's electable, because he does not have the media on his side, all the voter fraud, all the elites that are trying to prevent him from winning. 2020 was rigged. I mean, I could go into so many different things.
Right, but the light blue or purple, whatever you want to call them, the purple suburban moms, they know what's happening in their schools now. So the blue collar worker who didn't see the jobs come back as Biden promised, the energy workers, the people, there's a large swath, the black community. I mean, they see this. And I think when granted the opportunity to choose between Biden's policies and Trump's policies, I think you're going to see a lot more people peel off. I recognize that, yes, but they're going to say it's kind of like rather the a-hole that you don't that you know than the one that you don't, or the one that's already doing this. So they're going to look at their lives in comparison, and they're going to say, what was life like before the pandemic? And it's going to be like the 50s, you know. And so I think that, yeah, is he unelectable normally? I would say yes. Biden has become such an awful, god awful president, and the Democrat Party has they have lit the world on fire. That right now, the more they attack Trump, the more likely he is to get elected. And at this point, I don't see how he doesn't get elected. They could put him in jail and he will become president.
So you're saying if Biden did an average job, maybe slightly under mediocre, Trump would probably not be electable. You think Biden would get reelected?
I think if he'd done a slightly mediocre job for the last 3 years and not gone after Republicans constantly, if he had just ignored people, I don't know why people keep giving,
Right.
if you give air to your enemies, they're just going to keep breathing. So, he's just pumping oxygen in that room and just pissing people off. I mean, people who like me might sit here and look at a Ron DeSantis and say, oh, that's an effective governor, blah, blah. And Trump, do I want a president who's only going to be in for 4 years and he's a bit older? And I love Trump, but when it comes to push to shove, the attacks that the media make feel like they're attacks on all of us. And funny enough, DeSantis tends to stand up for more of the values that we actually push forward. But Trump is the punching bag, and we see ourselves as a part of that echelon, that shield, and we're feeling the bruises, and we're ready to fight back. And I just think that that's the groundswell he brings with him from his base. And when you put that in conjunction with people who are just so tired of Biden's policies, that's how he wins. But if Biden had done a good job or an average job and not attacked MAGA, and had just gone along with everybody and not pushed some extremist policies and been just middle of the road, I think you would be right now looking at an election. I don't think Trump would have run. I think if he'd not gone after him legally, I don't think Trump would have run.
And there's been a lot of talk about Gavin Newsom replacing Joe Biden. What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, there's a lot that has to happen. I would not be surprised to see Kamala Harris or Joe Biden for some reason or another. And by the way, I want to say this very clearly. Because he's old. Okay, so because he's old, if something were to happen to Joe Biden, if he were to become incapacitated, I think there's a no question Kamala Harris has to immediately take on Gavin Newsom as vice president. And I think that what you're actually going to end up seeing is her, rather than them launching the ticket with her again, they're going to suddenly say they need her desperately at the UN to push through something, or a Secretary of State, and they're bringing in Gavin Newsom. So I think he'll see if they don't find a way to make Biden's health deteriorate faster than it already is, I think you'll see Gavin Newsom start to be groomed and to replace Kamala Harris very soon.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting how they go about this.
Well, I mean, DeSantis and Newsom are essentially running shadow campaigns, right? So
yeah,
they're both running. Newsom, I mean, DeSantis is not dumb, and his donors are the ones that came to him and said, "Let's do a run." But what they did was they said, "Let's do a run just in case Trump doesn't, things don't pan out for Trump."
Right.
And he made a tactical error, and he jumped out into the race too early. He should have waited until 3 or 4 people jumped in and then said, fine, I'm going to jump in because I'm going to go defend Trump's legacy, that kind of thing, whatever. And then, whether or not Trump got in, he would have saved his political career. But he's still running a shadow campaign. And I think it's mostly based on the fact that there are still a portion of the Republican Party that believe they need a palatable president in waiting, candidate in waiting, in case Trump is convicted of a crime that prevents him from running for president.
Right. No, that makes sense. And do you think they'll succeed in stopping him from running for president? I mean, it looks pretty intense right now. It looks pretty crazy.
I'd say it's 50-50.
I feel like they're closer than they've ever been to really.
Yeah, rinky-dink charges, but I think I'd say it's 50-50. It's a coin toss right now. The problem is that DeSantis is now tainted. So you got Vivek Ramaswamy, who's the only go-to, and quite frankly, I don't think that's the chief executive. I like him. But I don't know if, again, being a version of Trump is what we need. So when you talk about it, we need a chief executive who knows how to run a state, and has run a state. Maybe has had an opportunity to serve in a foreign policy position. That's what you're going to want to look for in case Trump is not able to run. But the timing of it right now, I don't know how much closer they can get. You can't pull them off. You're not going to be able to do it. If they weren't willing to let the Hunter Biden laptop out prior to the election, there's no way that you can sentence the former president and make him ineligible to be president in the midst of the actual election. And we're in the year. So once we turn the calendar to January 1st, there's a change in people's heads. Then the election is this year. Well, when you remove the guy from the election the year before, 2 years before, that's one thing. But you take him out the year of the election during the primaries, I would worry about the reaction that you would get from people.
Right. And what do you make of what do you make of the whole scenario with the voter fraud? Do you legitimately think it was stolen in 2020?
I think that's a loaded question, because it depends on how you define stolen, right? So you have to get into a lot of do I think some of the theories are incorrect? Yes, absolutely. Do I think some of the theories are correct? Possibly. Do I think there's a lot that stinks about it? Yes. Do I think there was cheating? Oh, well, absolutely. There's been cheating in every election since ever. So the question was there enough electoral fraud? We'll never know. They never let us look at the evidence. So as a person who's a logical person, you're asking me, what do I feel? I feel like it was stolen. What do I think? Well, I have to think with the evidence, and what I think is that I need more evidence.
But if it was stolen in 2020, if it wasn't fair and square, what makes 2024 differently?
Nothing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see them taking any extra measures or signing any legislation.
I think I think you're going to have a camera outside of every single Dropbox, where people are going to be making it clear they're filming you.
Right.
I think that you're going to have more Republicans than ever volunteer to work polling stations. I think there are areas that you're not going to be able to fix, obviously, like in Arizona, where they just refuse to do anything to fix it. But I think that there are areas where they've instituted laws that either make it give us a fair battleground, or at least an opportunity to be able to watch out for fraud. Now, do I think it's been done in the states that are most vulnerable? No, I haven't seen anything in Georgia that would make me feel more comfortable about Georgia. But I do think that there's, enough change that has happened that I have enough faith in it. I have to have faith in it. If I don't have faith in this, Rory, then what do I see? Look, if Biden is elected this time, barring any major changes in the election makeup or anything major happening in the world the next year, and I mean huge, how is Biden reelected? This country is falling apart. The world is on fire. The United States has no leader. We don't have a president. We have a resident, and our resident in chief is not all there. And the fact that he has a Twitter account dedicated to pointing out that he was standing in a handshake line yesterday just to prove how virile our president is. No, we have a resident, and that guy shuffles around in slippers and has no idea what's going on.
Now, if Trump gets elected, what would it look like on election day in the streets? Do you worry that we're going to see a repeat of something much worse than 2016?
Yes.
Yes. It will make 2016 look like batting practice.
It'll make the riots of 2020 look like batting practice.
Good Lord.
They're ready. I mean, you got to remember that we've had 7 million illegals cross into this country. That's by estimates put forth by Border Patrol. I would estimate it's probably closer to 10 million. We know that 70% of them are military-aged males that are unaccompanied. We come from every single country on earth, with the exception, I've been corrected online, with the exception of the Vatican. I don't think we've had anyone sneak over from the Vatican, but from every other country on earth. So with that being the case, we don't know how many bad people are here. but I know they're all waiting for an opportunity. And if I was a bad person, I would use that opportunity, the chaos that would emanate from that election, to create havoc and to disable and cripple this country as much as possible.
Now you speak about the border, and it's a time like never before. Record levels. The other day, at one of the border crossings, they said they had over 12,000, the highest on record in one single day. What are we going to do about this madness? What are we going to do? I feel like we're going to have another big 9/11 type terrorist attack, except much worse. And I think there'll be numerous going on at the same time. I think we're going to have something like we've never experienced before. I mean, you think about the resources that people have now and how advanced technology is and how things are different compared to 20 years ago. You know,
I mean, I get what you're asking. So the question is, I don't know if you can see it over my shoulder, but there's a flag back here, and it's gone with me everywhere all over the world. It's flown on September 11th over New York City fire houses. It's flown over the Pentagon, over the Capitol. It's flown in Afghanistan, Iraq, Kuwait. It's been everywhere. It's been everywhere I've been. And the last place it flew was when I was running for Congress. I went down and spent a day with the Border Patrol at the southern border. And I flew it at the southern border, and I flew it incorrectly, just in distress for a reason. We have our border is so porous, and the danger that exists, as you pointed out, it's not even as simple as technology, the type of things that are at people's fingertips, but it's the idea that people, transportation, how quickly someone could move from a very hostile nation on this earth, how quickly you could get somebody from the Gaza Strip to the Mexican border is insane. And how quickly you could have them armed and with money and the means with which to disrupt our fragile ecosystem here in the United States it's insane to think that it's not that it isn't waiting to happen right now. So that's where we stand as a country, and you think this is all a result of horrible policies from the Biden administration.
and speaking of, this matter, will we ever tackle this problem fully? Will we ever address this and really have the right legislation that stops it? Or is this always going to be something that's a talking point, always going to be something that we experience? And I feel like this has been going on for as long as I can remember, and nothing legitimate ever gets done. I mean, sure, Republicans have a few short-term wins with immigration, but it starts back up again.
So let me ask you a question. Is Washington, D.C. a state yet?
Nope.
What about Puerto Rico?
No.
Okay, so Democrats.
They want it. They want to have Washington, D.C.
Do they? Do they?
They say they do, but who knows if they really do.
But they had the lower house, they had the upper house, and they had the presidency. And after the election, when they campaigned on those two things, they did absolutely nothing about it. So, what is my answer? What is the uniparty going to do? Nothing. They're going to keep bringing up the border to get us to keep it till whatever the next issue is that they did, and it'll rotate through because they don't want to fix it. They get a lot of cheap labor from there. This is why we need term limits. This impacts actual everyday Americans. And, my reason I think that I was supposed to be on the show, and obviously we haven't talked about it, and that's okay. But, I just had an incident where I, had to kill a guy. And I was forced to do that through his own violent actions and defending myself and defending women. But the point is that the women that I was defending, I can say, even though the investigation from our legal team is not complete, it's the result of a pipeline across the border for sexual slavery, for women who are paying off coyotes through sexual servitude. So I can tie directly my hip getting replaced 3 weeks ago to
Jesus.
the horrible Biden policies at the border. I can tie it
Totally.
directly. It's a very tiny, short line. And you sit here and you look at that and you go, it impacts everyone. I can't carry my children around, and they're all under the age of 7. I can't help my wife. I can't do things because the VA is not only a failure, but also on top of that, the very policies that impact our day to day lives are failures from the Biden regime.
Yeah, and I will say that there are a lot of people who have, I feel, the stories I've heard and just reports I've read that have to really put their lives in jeopardy to fight off these illegals that go on their property, that you know uh, invade their space, start altercations with them. I mean, there's so many different scenarios and different variables and things, but tell your story.
Well, I was gonna add on to that. Don't forget the opioid crisis. That if
Right.
it wasn't for the Chinese opioids that were being pushed up here through Mexico, then we wouldn't have the record number of deaths. And they keep wanting to take away firearms from everyone, but they could prevent the opioid crisis that they've started with fentanyl, and they won't stop it.
Right.
So, yeah, my wife and I had so 3 weeks or 3 months ago, we had a horrible incident. We had a date night. We've been married. Are you married?
No, no, married.
Oh man, you just have nothing tying you down. My goodness. Yeah. So I have a beautiful, amazing wife, and
Love it.
she gave
Love
me
it.
4 beautiful children, and so we had my brother in town and got an opportunity to go take a date night.
Yeah.
And when you're older, you'll understand that a date night really means quiet dinner, which we did in the hotel lobby. There's a bar and lobby, and it's a boutique hotel here called the Indigo.
Nice.
And it's for Waco, really expensive, $650 a night kind of hotel,
Wow.
And so we got a suite, and I go up, and all you want is a bath and bedtime where you can
Right.
literally sleep without children climbing on you. So
Right.
that's yeah, look forward to your exciting life, but it's great. It's the best thing ever. And we were asleep, and all of a sudden, we just heard 3 in the morning, just screams. Sounded like a child to me when I first woke up, and my wife, sat up in bed and said, "Do you hear that screaming?" And I said, "Yeah." And what is it? And I started getting out of bed, threw on my pants. Not even a shirt. I just thinking there's a medical emergency. There's a fire, something like that. And I move towards the door, and when I get the door open, before what you're expecting to see juxtaposed with what I actually saw, which is just glass all over the floor, and this woman screaming into her phone that there's a man in the room who's going to kill these women. And she just looks at me and says, like, help us. And so I retreated into the room, and I got my 45, which is my standard, that I carry with me, and I went to my wife and I told her, go crawl in the bathtub and call 911, which is our sadly that we have sort of an SOP for this. But then I went out into the hallway, and a woman's literally screaming. I'm trying to get information from her. I'm not getting anything, but it's 2 doors down from us, and I can hear this man screaming and furniture breaking and the women screaming. And later on 911 calls, I got to listen to them. They sort of, give me more of a perspective on what was happening inside the room, and my guesstimates were correct. But I couldn't get the woman's telling me, "Oh, shoot the door down," and I'm going, "This is not a movie, you can't shoot the door down." So I banged on the door and moved across the hall and kept my weapon at the low ready to see what was about to happen. And this behemoth of a man opens the door, not wearing a shirt, 375 pounds, 6'6". And I'm 6'5", but I'm already 100% combat disabled, but I had a bad hip as it was, so my ability to move backwards or anything of that nature is highly limited, a limp at the time. And so I'm across the hall, and I know that I have maybe a second to react, but if this man the size comes towards me, but I'm processing that he's not holding any weapons, but I'm also looking over his past him, the very little bit I can see, to the women that are in there, and one's on the bed, one's on the floor behind the bed, and you can see they're in obvious distress and just chaos all throughout the room. He's blathering something and he slams the door. And I move back across the hall and look, and there's no hotel security. There was no hotel security, and the police aren't there. And of course, here I am, a guy holding a gun in a hallway. I don't know what my wife has told them or what any 191 callers told her, but I don't want to get shot by the police. But I can tell from the noise in the room, the man screaming, that this is not de-escalating, that I have to maintain and try and remove him from the room and de-escalate this. So I go and I bang on the door again. He comes to the door. I'm across the hall, and he tells me, if you're going to shoot me, shoot me. And he's gonna harm these women. And he slams the door again, shaking the entire hallway. And I go in and look, and I go to the elevator, no police. I go back, I hear him. He's telling the women that he's gonna, kill them, and that, he's gonna go out in a blaze of glory kind of thing. He's just screaming gibberish. But the point I got was that I had to try again. So I banged on the door again, and I moved to the side of the hallway, and the man came out. And this time he sort of sat there and rocked back and forth. And he actually walked out in the hallway and turned and went to my left, right out of the room, but towards the elevators. And I thought, for a brief moment, maybe, this is de-escalated, he'll move on. And I made the tactical error of not following him with my weapon, just with my head. And it just took a second. And he saw the weakness and went for it and lunged, grabbed me by the neck, picked me up by my neck with one arm, slammed me into the wall, fracturing my spine, and went reaching for my firearm. And he got his hands on it. So I had no choice. Obviously, at that point, I had to discharge a round. But he was so quick and got on the weapon that's all I had was one round. And before I had to move to cover the trigger, he was trying to take the gun from me. And he reached down with his other arm and grabbed onto it. He didn't make a noise, so I assume I'd missed, and now I'm in this struggle with a man twice my size for a firearm. And we're moving and kind of, for lack of a better word, dancing, trying to get this. And from my wife's perspective, she was in the bathroom, and she said that she heard the firearm go off, and she had no idea who'd been shot, whether it was me or him, because she didn't hear anything for over a minute. It's him and I grappled for this firearm. And right as I was about to give up on the firearm with one hand and start striking it as soft tissue, whatever I could do, because I was losing. We turned, and I saw red on the wall and realized that I'd struck him. And right as I realized that, I don't know what it was, but he just started fading to the ground, and he let go of the weapon. So I quickly field stripped it, set it inside of the elevator, yelled to my wife to throw me some towels, and she did. And I asked her what was going on while I was trying to render aid and save this man's life. And then, someone else came down finally at that point to help. But up until that point, I was all alone for that entire instance. And it wasn't until the police showed up a couple minutes later with guns drawn, obviously put us in handcuffs. For my poor wife, a weapon in her face, put her in handcuffs. But moved us down to the squad cars, and he didn't make it. Made the wrong decision that night, and then we found out later on through investigations that these women, were being trafficked up from Houston for prostitution, and that this is not an uncommon occurrence. That the hotel itself had removed itself from the Safe Streets program and taken its own cameras out. That it had no security. Almost as if they wanted this to happen. And we're currently trying to find that out, because, there's that song, that country song, not in a small town. Well, we're a small town, and it's here. And the one thing that we walked away from, aside from the trauma and having to go to therapy, and my wife, processing all of this, but the one good thing that we've been able to try and hopefully come from this, other than saving those women's lives, was this idea that maybe we could use this platform to express to people that this is not a hidden thing. Prostitution is not a victimless crime. Most women who are in prostitution have been in some way, shape, or form sexually abused since they were children, that they are being trafficked against their will, that beyond the talk, these women have horrible men who control their lives, mostly through drugs and through control of their money, and that they are victims. And that anyone who contributes to that, or who doesn't see something and say something, is themselves, unfortunately, contributing to the perpetuation of this violent cycle.
Does it feel like because you mentioned how you don't have full transparency yet. You don't have all the answers. You guys are still trying to figure it out. It seems suspicious because the cameras were being faulty. Does it feel like you're watching one of those movies that's filmed in a small town where the higher ups are in on, the sex trafficking ring, and then you find out at the end, and it's just like, wow, what a twist.
Yeah, as our investigators through our lawyer have been able to find out so far, a
Because
hotel
it's
that
easier to
has
get away with that kind of stuff in a smaller town.
yeah,
Like, yeah.
there's a lot more to this, and it's again, it's kind of I got to be careful actually what I say, but
Right.
because you don't want to tip the cap, right? But
Right.
I'd say that yeah, not as fun as Batman, where it's the mayor, that kind of thing.
Right. Right.
But would I say that it goes to people who are a part of this? Are they connected to important institutions within this area? Absolutely. You don't these types of crimes don't happen in a boutique hotel just because, and that hotel doesn't remove all of its cameras by choice. Just because. There's a lot to be said there.
How many politicians, and this may seem like a question that would be impossible to answer, but it's worth asking. How many do you think are involved in some way, shape, or form? Maybe not directly, but they're getting money from people that are orchestrating this kind of.
I'm not sure on the side of the trafficking because obviously there's,
Because I have heard on numerous occasions that there are politicians that are in bed with this sort of thing. And
right. So
I don't want to be that person who, just says these things just to say them. I mean, these are legitimate reports that have come out over the years. We don't really ever get names, though. We don't really get. You have some thoughts?
yeah, well, no. I mean, you're right. I'm just listening to you. You're right. But the what was it? We just saw the Congressional Fund for Sexual Harassment. That came out that it turns
Right.
out our tax dollars have been paying secretly for sexual harassment that we're not even told about. They're not even being censured for. Uh, um, I think it's impossible to think of any crime against human beings at this scale in this society where we have so many cameras, we have so many tools at the disposal of law enforcement that I don't think any major crime can happen without the complicit actions of people who are in positions of power. I don't think that's possible. That said, saying that doesn't mean that it could be who you think it is. You never know who, right? Who the people are. I mean, this hotel's right next to a major university that a lot of very wealthy people go to, and maybe a lot of those wealthy people like to come here without their wives to visit the kids. While they also take in, another young lady. Who knows? And that's horrible because that's is probably what's happening.
And you mentioned how the cameras were having issues.
No, they were removed. They took them out.
So are you going to be okay in a court of law? Are you cleared? Like
I
they
was
did the
cleared. Yeah.
investigation, everything's good? Because I want to make sure you have the proper evidence and a backup in case
Yeah.
something.
No,
Because we see a lot of people getting framed and getting charged with murder for defending themselves today.
absolutely. And that was obviously one of the great fears that you replay. But I even asked myself while I was in the squad car, based on the evidence that was given to me and what I saw even afterwards and the violence against those women, what I did was justified. The minute that man grabbed my firearm, reached for it, the minute he assaulted me and went for my firearm, that was the end of the conversation. Everything up to that point was a gray area. But that point, no, he's committed a crime that, I mean, you don't shoot into a hotel room door. You don't shoot a person who's unarmed just because they opened the door and they were beating on women. That's not an excuse to fire. But I wasn't really worried about it. And we got cleared by the grand jury 4 weeks ago, which was ironically the day that I had to go in and have a hip replacement. I mean, I was already borderline due for one, but after the incident, the damage that it did to me required me to finally go through with it. So I went into surgery and came out of surgery with a note from my lawyer.
And you brought up the hotels. Do you think they could be involved? Do you think they could be getting payments on the back end? Do you think they could be? collecting?
So I'm not sure what works as libel or slander, and I don't want to put myself in that position. But I would say that again, um, as you get more information to the size and scope of the operation, you have to ask yourself the legitimate question: is it possible to have conducted those types of activities without the knowledge of staff, at least at the bare minimum, staff. And how far up the food chain that goes, I have no idea. You know, do you have a shady manager, or does it go higher? But I would find it hard to believe in a hotel of that nature, with when you find out just how many arrests have been made for prostitution, when you find out just how many assaults and violent crimes have taken place and been hidden from the public. It's, because it's not on the Yelp reviews, right? As a matter of fact, if you Googled the hotel right now, it's not this isn't going to show up, right? And it just happened 3 months ago. So the fact of the matter is that I just don't think that there's something there. And if there's something there where there's smoke, there's fire. You know what I mean? But again, I'm not accusing any individual, and I'm not saying that because I don't have the facts in front of me. But looking at it, I would from that, I would pull from that I don't see how they didn't know.
Yeah, very odd. Very odd. I do want to transition topics. We've got a few minutes left, and I love talking to you. So it says here you were a storm chaser.
No, that was my call sign.
That was your call sign, but you were
Yes.
you were in the military. And yeah, you also served as a civil affairs SNCOIC in operations and planning.
Yeah. So the military. That's funny. So when I got done I did my time in the Marine Corps.
You were in the high up ranks though. You did a lot of stuff.
I did.
I'm going through it right now.
So civil affairs and psychological operations is under USASOC, which is the United States Army Special Operations Command, and so use the KPOC, which is the United States Civil Affairs and PSYOP Command. They have one of the most unique missions in the world, and it's very unique to our military. We created civil affairs. During the Mexican-American War. Actually, was when it was first commissioned. Civil affairs and psychological operations work in good and bad things. You know, our job is to. My job in civil affairs on the good side was to create simple solutions for complex problems all over the world. And I had the opportunity to work on all the way up at the PACOM team. It was a Pacific Command team out of 351 KCOM, which is up near San Francisco. And I had the opportunity to also work and run missions in Ukraine and Africa from Missouri. Heck, I was sent to Afghanistan out of Southern California. So I had the opportunity to practice that trade all over the place. But, I never get a lot of opportunities to talk about. One of the things I think people seem to forget is that for everyone who talks about PSYOP people out there who might be running things against us in our government, just remember that there is a retired PSYOP guy out there who's very aware of this, and they're talking to their friends, and we still all stay in connection with each other, and we know what's going on in the world. And if people would listen, you just have to separate the noise from the real information that's accurate. And when you can do that, there's a lot of smart people out there who've seen this. They knew from the get-go on the pandemic on down, and I'm real proud of my branch mates for especially those that are retired now, but that they stay in the game and pay attention because I get calls from around the world to do consulting on things, and it's a unique perspective. So it was a very cool branch. And so anybody who still wants to go in the military, I recommend once you've achieved enough rank, you consider moving over and shifting over to civil affairs. It's a lot of fun.
And speaking of the PSYOPs, you're an expert in that. What do you make of all the PSYOPs that they're pulling these days? Because they're doing it constantly. It is overwhelming how many PSYOPs. I think there's more PSYOPs now than there's ever been.
Well, the nature of a PSYOP is to breed confusion, right? So, and to manipulate
people.
The
media does it 100 times a day. Go ahead.
Right. So I would argue, rather than we're in multiple PSYOPs, I would argue that what we're in is a multi-stage PSYOP that has a lot of, you can't speak to any one group anymore. We don't have 3 channels. How old are you?
32.
Okay, so you're way too young to remember this, but I remember when there were only 3 channels on TV.
Yeah, no, I
And
remember. Of course, I
okay,
remember.
and I remember
I didn't get the smartphones didn't come out until I was probably a sophomore in high school. So I was still using flip phones in middle school.
yeah, smartphones came out when I was like 29. So,
Okay.
but we didn't have cell phones. God, you
Right.
wouldn't know what that was like. I mean, you guys had cell phones growing up. You couldn't even, you
Yeah,
know what
I
it's
didn't
like?
get my first cell phone though. How old was I? I was in like seventh or eighth grade.
Yeah, do you know what it's like to make plans with somebody and then
That was good. Yo, I
go and
remember when I
wait?
was young, before seventh or eighth grade, it was the home phone. It was always the
Yeah,
home phone, and then
but that's
there was only one, and we had to take turns to use it. And I just like that. I love that. I think that's
Uh,
great.
we had that. That's all we had, and that's all I had growing up, all the way through high school. And I can tell you that it is. You want to talk about just going on a date and not knowing. Go on a date when you don't. You getting ghosted is bad, I'm sure,
Right.
but go on a date when you had to call somebody from your house phone, and now you're sitting in a restaurant and going, "Huh." Are they gonna
Right.
show up? That anxiety, and you're going, I would. What am I gonna do? Call her house? That's weird.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a different time, man. Different
And
time.
we
I
all
forget what
get
we were talking about, but yeah.
and we all get we were talking about psyops, but
Oh yeah,
and
television,
yeah,
television. Yeah.
yeah, oh yeah, and going back to the whole what you just mentioned, the whole scenario with cell phones, when people don't have them, they get anxious as hell because they can't find the person, they can't track them down,
I
and they're yeah,
I'm a part of that now. I mean, we're all a part of that now, and it's
right,
funny. I couldn't imagine not having information at my fingertips now, and
right,
it's. But that said, I do try and take large breaks away from social media and from using my phone. I'll leave it on purpose across the house just so I don't have it with me all the time, so I'm not checking it. But yeah, it's fun. It's a very different world, man. Our kids are gonna be just so wrecked. They're just so much technology, and they have no idea what it's like.
and speaking of a different world and how things are just out of hand and all the indoctrination and all the toxic ideology, I'm surprised that you're still advocating and telling people to join the military, even though it's gone so woke. A lot of people that were in the military, they say it's not recognizable anymore. They think it's dangerous in various ways with how
Oh, I'm
woke
not.
it is.
I want to be clear. I'm not advocating for anyone to join the military.
Oh, okay,
If I were you, I would wait until the first wave
right,
is done. When people realize, did you ever see Starship Troopers?
yeah, long
Okay,
time
remember
ago,
after the first wave gets destroyed, and then they go, "Yeah, change the leadership, and we're
right,
going to change how we do things around here."
yeah,
Yeah, that's what's going to happen. So it's really horrible.
yeah.
I'm not saying that blithely. I'm not trying. I don't think this is wonderful that Americans are going to suffer, but they're going to suffer. I can tell you that for a fact. When I was leaving, my soldiers were spending less time with their weapon systems than they were in woke classes every year. That is an absolute fact.
Now, when you served, did you serve in Iraq and Afghan?
I've served all over the world. So Afghanistan, but through Iraq, been through a number of humanitarian missions. So some of it's fun, some of it's not fun.
What was that like, though, man? Being in combat, being in the action, everything.
I it's I'll give you a hint. I'll give you a thing. I'll tell you this. Anytime you ever meet anybody in the military,
Yeah,
it's like if anybody start using the word intel, you know they're full of crap because it's just information, right?
right.
But anybody who starts to tell you their war stories, probably didn't partake in very many war stories because they're not fun to tell. But I will tell you because I see that we got about probably 2 minutes left. I'm going to give you a 1 minute story that's worth it. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. So I have to go out to this tiny little fob Bullard to go and check on some radio repeaters that were sending out propaganda, I mean news from the government. And when I went out there, I went in a UN bird helicopter and was waiting. And I was going out to meet a small detachment that was out there so we could check on this. And I'd stay out there for a couple days. And it's a Romanian fire base. And as we go into this HLZ helicopter landing zone, the guy behind me is so excited. I don't know why. But when we're about, I don't know, maybe somewhere between 10 and 15 feet up and still landing, he panicked and pushed me out of the bird. and I fell. And as I'm falling, all I can think is I don't want my rifle to hit me in the face. And so I just go spread eagle and hold my rifle back and land. And of course, I got to lay there and wait for the bird to get land and everybody to get off. And I get off and I'd fractured, or no, I was fine, but my breastplate on my plate carrier was destroyed. So anyway, 9mm made it. But I go in and I'm walking around this Romanian base for a couple days, and I notice that the female troops are giggling at me, and I think, well, am I becoming popular out here? So I asked my buddy, I said, hey man, I noticed those girls were. He goes, oh, you haven't been to the chow hall, have you? And I said, no, what's that about? Thinking maybe lots of girls. I go in there, and what they had done is they have a raid tower camera, and it films everything. And whenever a helicopter comes in, they film it in case something goes wrong. Well, they filmed my fall and then put it on a loop and played it on repeat throughout meal periods in this tent of me falling out of a helicopter over and over. And everybody just had a great big laugh about it. So, yeah, that's me in a nutshell. I'm the guy that a bunch of Romanians would know as falling out of a helicopter. And that's probably a better story than anything I could tell about being in the military.
In that moment, did you think it was over for you? Did you think you were going to die?
No, it's 10 feet up.
Oh, it was only 10 feet.
Yeah, 10 to 15 feet. Yeah, somewhere in
Okay.
between that. It was high enough that it was an oh crap, and I had time to react and position my body, but not time enough that I had, life flash before my eyes kind of thing. It wasn't that far down. It was just, it hurt, but yeah. No, I've had worse things happen to me.
You ever came face to face with any terrorists, stuff like that?
I've negotiated with terrorists.
How's that?
Same as negotiating with everyone. Over there, there's not much of a distinction in a lot of cases.
Like give kind of like just like
just
sum it
think
up a
about
little
it.
bit.
Think about it this way. What you're essentially doing is you're talking to people who are saying, if you stop giving us money, then we're going to start attacking.
Right.
But we recognize that you can't give us money.
Mm-hmm.
So what we need you to do are get these projects going that are construction. It's like an old time mafia. I mean, it's just that bad. And so that's what you're dealing with is you're negotiating. Well, how much longer is this going to get me a break? I know that the new commander that went in after us, and I'm not going to say what fob I was at because I don't want him called out for it, but he went in and tried to play hardball with the provincial governor. And not 2 weeks later, I lost two dear friends from USAID who were out on a foot patrol. Not a foot patrol, it was a market patrol, but they were hit. And it was a warning from the governor. It was essentially saying, hey, you don't make these projects happen and this money flowing, then I can't do anything about it. They call it bakshish. Yeah.
Did you ever have to kill anybody?
We don't ever ask anybody that. Yeah, it's I have had to kill somebody. I just did it a couple months ago.
No, I know, but in the military, like when you're in combat and you've got people coming at you, I can imagine. No.
Yeah, I mean, it's again one of those things that I don't really talk about it that much. Yeah, it's none of it's fun. You know what I mean? And I'm not chiding you for it. It's just not. It's.
No, I hear you.
It sounds a lot more glorious when you're in the military. It sounds like from the outside, but I'll tell you that 99% of what you do in the military is train and sit around and wait, and then you have these 1% bursts of action, and half the time you're scared out of your mind, and you're just hoping, and you're on autopilot. Like that night in the hallway. I was on autopilot for half of it. I mean, I didn't know until afterwards that I'd field stripped my weapon and removed the live round and set it down. I know I did it. I know that's what I would have done. I know afterwards that I'd done it but I don't remember doing it. I was on autopilot. And, I just think that situations like that, my job in civil affairs, it's your tip of the spear, but you're the package. And there's this old joke that if you're firing your weapon in civil affairs, it's because you did your job poorly, because you're the person that's supposed to be keeping the bullets from firing down range at the tip of the spear. But I'm very proud of the fact that I was very good at my job.
Right. And we're seeing a lot of veterans that are coming back with PTSD and stuff like that. Did you ever experience that?
Yes. I don't think I know anyone who's seen anything of consequence who's not experiencing real PTSD in their life. I think that how everyone has an opportunity to approach the therapy for that is different. I don't think there's enough resources for it. I don't think there will ever be enough resources for it. But that said, people's decisions about whether or not they're able to move forward. I just lost a very close friend of mine to suicide. Longtime veteran, kids the same age as mine, and I had no idea he was struggling that hard. No idea. And he wasn't one of my safety calls, but we're letting our nation's warriors down, because I can tell you that just the things I struggle with are tough enough. And I know there are people who've seen much, much worse than I have.
How much of the suicides and these problems that these veterans are facing has to do with the VA not doing enough?
Too many.
Yeah, I figured. And
I mean, it's just period. So they just expanded healthcare, which is great for people who had issues from burn pits. I have issues from burn pits. It's great. But they don't expand. Just because you expand the resource pool doesn't mean it's not the resource pool, but the patient pool doesn't mean you expanded the resource pool. And once people are in the VA system and they're able to get VA care, they're then open to use all of the VA healthcare things, which they should be allowed to do. But what that does to behavioral health, it puts an immense strain on it. And there's just not enough behavioral health workers to deal with the number of veterans, not to mention add in the PTSD that the average citizen experienced during COVID. And you have, a lot of people seeing doctors right now, and not a lot of doctors.
Do you think it will ever get fixed properly, fully? You think it'll always be a mess for the most part?
I think that the VA will always exist as an opportunity for veterans to give their life for their country. One last chance.
And before you go, in regards to corruption, certain people have to blow the whistle when they're in the military. Was there anything you ever witnessed where you couldn't believe your eyes in regards to corruption, things that were just uncalled for?
Gosh, yeah, there's a number of things. And real quick, just want to touch on what we just left. I don't want to sound like a defeatist when I say that, I don't, it's not that I haven't given up, but I think that I forgot your question. I apologize. I started to think
in regards to the corruption and things that you've witnessed that you couldn't believe your eyes, that you were just like,
I watched them literally take an entire field, the boat field, and Congress had ordered a study of the boat field to decide how to move forward, and the boat field the Army wanted to get rid of it. And so behind Congress's back during COVID, they sold off and consolidated all of the boat field, got rid of all the soldiers, so that by the time the report was able to be generated, it was a service that was unable to reach even the bare minimum mission requirements. But they had already pre-sold it all. They did it under Congress's nose. I saw child trafficking in Afghanistan. We were told to turn our heads, that it was not our role. And that to me is one of the worst things that my government's ever done to me.
Oh my God. And what do you make of the war going on right now?
Which one?
I know we've got so many.
Yeah.
And it feels like we'll be in a third one before the year is over with China and Taiwan. That's what
I've been predicting that one for over a year. I'm surprised I think that war's actually already started. It's just we're not seeing the shots fired. But no, that war already started. They've already started laying their traps for their everything that they're going to do to pre-position this attack. They're going to go after Taiwan and take it. They're going to dare us.
Is what's going on in the Middle East, do you think going to last probably 20 years? Do you think it's going to last forever?
I think that the Middle East will continue to be the Middle East as long as oil and religion are the two major driving factors of that region.
I'm referring also to the whole Israel-Hamas thing. Do you think this will lead to a World War III? Do you think other countries will get involved? How do you think that's going to play out?
I think that there are a lot of countries that are recognizing the economic chaos that's going on in the world, and that they would all love a reset. And I think the opportunity to have a world war would be a great chance to reset the books. So remember, it's not their children that go, it's ours.
Absolutely. And you mentioned the Afghanistan scenario a couple minutes ago, the withdrawal, correct?
Oh, we could talk about the withdrawal. Yeah, that was a horrible, horrible mess, and that I still don't understand why they did what they did.
And these people that order these various things in the military, like these politicians that want these military people to carry out various attacks or various moves. Like, does that blow your mind how they can just give orders and it can just happen and happen, even if it's so wrong and out of line?
I mean, you got to realize that a lot of these people are insulated. They make sure that their decisions are insulated. You know, they make sure that they've been cross-checked and checked so that if they fail, that it's been tied to somebody above them who would have to take the sword as well. In
Right.
the instance of the withdrawal from Afghanistan, they had Biden taking full credit for making that stupid decision to move from a secure base to an unsecure airport. That is just the most insane, dumb, stupid decision that cost what we know of 14 lives, American lives, but how many untold others? How many American um, collaborators were lost that we'll never know. I know that how many signals went dark that day for me, that week for me. And I know how many Chad Robichaud was able to get out, and they were able to get out only 3 of ours. And I can tell you that it was just a boondoggle, and it almost feels like it was on purpose. So when you ask why would somebody not be held responsible, because they did it on purpose.
Right. And have you looked into the whole military industrial complex and that whole scheme?
Oh yeah, I mean I've been aware of it. Just because you go into the military and you say I'm not going to be a part of the problem doesn't mean you aren't aware of the problems. Yeah, but wars are profitable, and as
Right.
long as pain is profitable, then people are going to continue to inflict pain.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Jason, I love having you with us, man. I could talk to you all day. Tell everybody where they can get involved, where they can find you, connect with you, all that good stuff.
Yeah, I'm easiest to find on X or Twitter at real Jason Nelson. You can find me there. I love engaging with people, and then you can also, if you go to jasonstormnelson.com, I believe they have the website up. But this is for our 501c3 that we're building that is going to move towards education to help people to cite and be able to recognize the contributing factors to sexual trafficking and hopefully be able to prevent incidents like the ones that happened here, and maybe we can clean up our small towns. But hey, Rory, I really appreciate you bringing me on, and thank you so much. This has been a wonderful conversation.
Thank you, sir. And real quick, you're the co-founder of Prepper All Naturals. I don't think you brought that up.
Yeah, this isn't a sales call. My brother and I, both 100% combat disabled vets, started a company to shift the paradigm on long-term shelf-stable food. So we created wholecows.com through Prepper All Naturals. And what that is that we have isolated a cattle source. We have it hand carved and sous vide and pasteurized, then freeze dried so that it's good for 25 years. And more importantly, it's the best parts of the cow: the sirloin, the picanha, the fillet, the ribeye. But it's you don't have to survive; you can thrive. So everybody else who's having taco flavored beef porridge when the lights go out for a couple weeks, you'll be the person who's having a steak.
Amen.
Yep.
Amen. And does the food shortage make you nervous?
I would not have started the company if it wasn't for this mission. I only do things that are mission oriented and that would help people. So the company was strictly started because I see the shortage is coming and I see a way to stabilize this. So trying to get ahead of it and help as many people as possible.
Amen, Jason. And I love having you with us, and keep up the great work, man. And again, tell everybody where they can find you.
That would be again at Twitter at real Jason Nelson, and then of course you can also go to Jason Storm Nelson, or you can go to wholecows.com. If you go to the info link at the bottom, they have me in there. Apparently, I'm the CEO, so you'll find my bio, and you can find me through there as well.
Perfect, my friend. Well, God bless you. Have a fantastic weekend, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you, Rory. God bless you.
Thank you. Stay with us, everybody. We'll be right back. Everybody, it's been a fantastic show today. Thank you all for tuning in. We will see you next time on Rory Sauter and the News. Until then, God bless you. Much love. Cheers. Have a fantastic weekend. Good night.